gusto in my voice today?
You know, Gary, you have such gusto that it's a hard. You're a tough measuring stick, even against yourself.
Whoa. Yeah, well, I haven't had much sleep lately. My sleep patterns have been all foobarred. But yesterday I actually went to Brooklyn for a presentation at the Avenue N Jewish Center, which is a synagogue, its name. And holy cow, it was unbelievable how arduous the trip was there and back. When you look as far as the crow flies from my house to my destination, you think, it wouldn't take long. No. Transportation is always a challenge in the New York area. Welcome everybody to the Critical Thinking Forum. Here are the room rules. We're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. Top of the hour, I will toss out my opening salvo, which hopefully will encourage you to participate. And if you wish to, just raise your hand and come up onto the stage. You can wait until something is offered on the stage, which prompts you to want to join us up here. Or if you wish, based on the topic and anticipation, you can come up now, as has Steve, and welcome as well to Alan to the stage. Generally speaking, after people speak, they're removed from the stage to the audience. This is not punitive in nature, but only to make it possible for me to maintain the queue. I call people in the order in which I see them, which may not coincide with the order in which you see yourself on the stage. So if it appears I've skipped over you, just be patient. I always get to everybody who is on the stage. Since we are here from 5 to 6 p.m. New York time, at about 5 minutes to 6, we will no longer be inviting people onto the stage. But if at the 6 o'clock hour you are in queue, we will go into extra time to give everybody an opportunity to speak. Unlike many of the other rooms on Clubhouse, in the Critical Thinking Forum, we endeavor to speak one at a time and not to interrupt one another, and we treat each other with a degree of decorum and respect, even when we vehemently disagree, and for that, I thank you in advance. Welcome to the Critical Thinking Forum. Welcome to the stage, Brent, with your pretty puppy on your screenshot there, your profile pic. We are less than a minute away from starting precisely at the top of the hour. Somebody else wants up here. Synergy and Rep John. There you go. Welcome.
Yeah, that's an interesting, before we all get started, interesting piece. I just told the little brother, apparently there are no such cuts to NOAA funding. He gave me a document to look at.
I think there are, and I will delineate that. But if you want to challenge that, feel free when it's your opportunity.
I think that's probably what I'm going to do, because he's been working on the big beautiful bill for the better part of like 2 months.
This is not the big beautiful bill. This is something that takes effect today. Okay, we're seconds away from the top of the hour. Welcome Alan to the stage as well. And John, who I think I welcomed before you got up here. We are now at the top of the hour. Welcome to the Critical Thinking Forum. We are here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. And today's topic is the hurricane data and food bank cuts good public policy. And you may wonder why, when the food bank cuts occurred some time ago, we are talking about that along with the hurricane data cuts, which take effect today. And I will tell you why. There was a story in the New York Times this morning that caught my attention, which said that as a result of those cuts, which I believe occurred in the spring sometime, I've got that data in front of me and I'll get to it in a second. But as a result of that, the food banks here in New York City are really hurting. They're not being able to meet the demand. And so I actually posted that to the chat, which is linked above, this morning. And I asked maybe rhetorically, I'm wondering whether this affects other cities around the nation. And so that prompted me to do a little research today, and the answer is yes, it is not unique to New York. So while we have one issue that is current, the other one is current in the sense that it is continuing. So let me, and I'm glad that Marshall jumped in there in advance, because maybe there's a misconception. These cuts to the hurricane data information, they are Defense Department satellite data cuts, and they have absolutely nothing to do with the big beautiful bill that is being voted on in the Senate today and was voted on earlier in the House of Representatives, which is something that we will obviously be getting into after the vote. But what the Trump administration did is they pulled the plug on the processing and distribution of microwave data, and this is a little technical, and I'm going to try to say it in non-technical terms because I don't even understand it from a technical standpoint, but from 3 satellites that are jointly operated by the Defense Department and NOAA. And the data includes these special sensor microwave imager sounder information. So basically what it does is that it peers through the clouds. So the issue is that at night, that's the only way they can really see like the eye of the storm. When the storm is well offshore, it's too far away for the hurricane hunting aircraft to fly into the center of it. And at night, otherwise you really can't see what is developing. So the whole idea is that if people are in the potential path of a hurricane, you want to give them as much reliable and advanced information as possible so that they can make the decisions with as much information as possible to be armed with on whether or not to evacuate or whatever decisions they think that they have to make. The earlier you start giving people information, which we know historically changes from hour to hour sometimes, much less day to day, but as much information as you can give them to give them an idea of what the potential strength of a storm may be is really paramount towards saving lives. So the experts are warning that there will be a degradation, I think is the proper word, of data as a result of this. Nighttime blind spots, and along with this lack of use of this data are layoffs among NOAA. So there are fewer people to analyze data today than there was yesterday, because this takes effect today. And by the way, it's not just, I didn't know this until I started researching this, the satellite information, but it's weather balloon information as well. They are reducing the number of weather balloon launches. Now, with regard to the food banks cuts, the USDA, under the president, canceled or paused more than $1 billion in funding across a number of food security initiatives. The Emergency Food Assistance Program, which sent truckloads of food to state and local warehouses, and the local food purchase and farm to school grants. Those supported school lunch, fresh produce via farmers. Those were cut as well, substantially. So, as I said early on here, what prompted this was the New York Times article, which was about the food banks in New York that are struggling. I decided to take a deeper dive into this In Virginia, and these are just, I'm just going to list a handful of them. There are probably more, but you get the idea. In Virginia, the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank lost nearly $1.5 million in funding. In New York, in Washington D.C., the Capital Area Food Bank had to cancel 670,000 meals. Nearly $3.5 million pulled from Massachusetts. Funding cut in half in the Hudson Valley of New York State. In Nevada, the Food Bank of Northern Nevada lost £1 million. This is how they're assessing it in meat and dairy. That bank serves 160,000 people, which is up 76% from before the pandemic. Houston lost 11 million. 60 fewer USDA tractor trailer loads monthly. 15% of the budget gone. More than 200 seniors no longer can get. What they're saying is 200 fewer seniors a month who got food from that food bank are getting it now. 1 million meals lost in Delaware, and in Tampa Bay, 20 million meals lost to the food bank. So, of course, the government has a response to all of this. NOAA is pushing back at those who are raising this issue. They are claiming that discounting the ingestion of the DoD microwave data is simply part of a standard process of data rotation and replacement. And they say that other satellites are providing microwave sensing. The experts say no. The reporting on the experts say no, but this is the government's position, and as is notable about the Trump administration, when there's a conflict such as that, it's the fault of the media. So NOAA is accusing the media of sensationalizing the issue and fueling unnecessary panic. As far as USDA programs, the USDA, I went to their website, they're describing the process as a rigorous line-by-line review. It's designed to remove spending that, according to their website, is, quote, contrary to the needs of ordinary working Americans. And programs that are tied to, quote, radical gender and climate ideologies. I frankly don't understand what that means, but the programs that were pulled, according to Ag Secretary Rollins, quote, no longer effectuate the goals of the agency. Okay, so, when we elect whoever it is the president, it doesn't matter who the president is, we expect that the president will have an administration, and that administration will effectuate programs that are necessary and designed for the benefit of society as a whole. So I guess there is a philosophical question here over whether the two programs to which we are referring today are truly beneficial to society as a whole. Is it costly to grab that data from the DoD satellites that are still up there generating the data and use it for hurricane weather predictions? Maybe it's too costly to be able to grab and analyze that data. And it's to the benefit, if this is good public policy, to pull the plug on that. I don't know. Nobody is saying that the satellites are dysfunctional now. So the data is still being generated, but maybe there's something there that I'm not seeing because I'm influenced by the news media that is sensationalizing this issue. I will just say, in fairness to my brethren, every story that I've seen on this is not, quote, the news media, close quote, sensationalizing. It's the experts that they are interviewing, meteorologists, former NOAA employees, I guess, who are sensationalizing this. In fairness, if it is an exaggeration of the threat, blame the people who are being interviewed. And there are a number of experts, or in the case of those who disagree, so-called experts, who are saying that this could very potentially cost lives. Okay, the food bank, when you cut money to food banks, is it because the food banks are distributing food to people who are not eligible? And by cutting the money to those food banks, which are still struggling to stay in operation, have you changed the policies of the food banks? I'm reading the administration's explanation of both of these cuts. You heard them. You heard exactly what I've read. Frankly, I can't wrap my mind around the explanation. Maybe some of you can, and can expand on it in a way that makes sense of all this to people like me and others who are, quote, sensationalizing, close quote, the issue. So with that, we'll call people in the order in which we see them. And today that order begins with Marshall. Marshall? Marshall.
I am right here.
All right, come on.
Go, Marshall. Go. So I think what we're talking about is the proposed budget bill, not because the big bill is not.
No, we are not.
Now,
we are not. These are cuts with regard to the food banks that took place in the spring, and the data flow was cut off as of today from the satellites. Nothing to do with the big, beautiful.
So just to do with the Trump administration through OMB clawing back money.
I don't know whether it's through OMB. I don't know the process in which this occurred.
It would be through the Office of
Okay, but whatever, the clawing back money is accurate, I guess. I don't know whether money is clawed back with regard to the satellites, because they're still up there generating the data. Although they did lay off some people at NOAA, so presumably those were the people who were analyzing the data. Maybe we didn't need them, nor the data that they were analyzing. I can't imagine that that's a major cut to the budget. But anyway, yes.
I will tell you, having a younger brother who redid the NOAA NASA reauth in 2018, reauthorization, he's not worried about it at all. Not even a little bit. And the only conclusion I can draw from that, since he's been on the Hill for 10 years, is that they're not making cuts in places that are like detrimental to NOAA's functioning. I would know OMB does have the power granted by Congress to claw back monies. They are not allowed to not distribute them, so they have to redistribute them at some point per the authorization language. But the Office of Management and Budget does have the ability to slow roll or claw back money.
And the premise of the questions asked are not whether they are authorized to do this. The question is whether this is good public policy.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, look, I'm gonna go with my little brother on this one. He's not worried about it, so I'm not gonna be worried about it. I only say that because he's somebody who is intimately aware of the functioning of NOAA and NASA, since that was what he did for a whole year and a half of his life. So I'm going to lean more on the side of, no, this is not as detrimental as we might think it is.
So how do you reconcile his analysis with that of the plethora of meteorologists and other experts who have come forward and said that this is potentially life-threatening.
That I am unsure how to pair together. I can only tell you what I know about him, and which is he did the reauthorization. He's intimately familiar with the code for NASA and NOAA. And so the only thing I can figure from talking to him is he doesn't think that the cuts made during the spring are going to slow down critical functions, and that puts him at odds with those meteorologists.
Well, wait a minute, maybe we're talking about two different things, because if he is analyzing cuts that occurred in the spring, and we're talking about cuts that occurred today, is it possible that to which you're referring and to which I am referring are two different things, or?
It's possible. I'll grant you that, this is a little confusing for me. It being cuts and clawback money, not bills. So it could be I was more trying to use your timeline than anything else, but his analysis does put him at odds with those meteorologists.
Yeah, I think there were cuts to NOAA that we've actually discussed before, and I think maybe the confusion is that you're referring to that because this is something that is happening today.
Gary, I think that's what it is. Thank you for correcting the confusion.
Well, if you hadn't brought it up, other people who might be confused wouldn't know either. What about the food banks?
I mean, I don't think cutting food bank money is good policy. Granted, townships and states are supposed to take care of their own folks, but where the township can't keep up, in particular in places like New York City or, say, like Houston or Dallas in Texas, those folks probably need federal funding. So that, I would argue, is not a good policy. But I will admit to being more confused about the NOAA and NASA than I think I actually have firmness on. But no, cutting food banks does not seem like good public policy to me.
I would hope that somebody might, somewhere along the line, give an explanation of why they're doing these things. But at any rate, thank you, Marshall.
Hey everybody, it's nice to see everybody. Did somebody kick John from the stage, by the way? I don't know if somebody did that, but
I doubt it. I don't think anybody gets kicked from the stage.
I got him a back channel that he was curious maybe.
Have him put his hand back up, and we'll invite him back.
I think he got, I don't know. I think he got kicked from the room or something. I don't know. All right, well, that's neither here nor there. Gary, I plead on the satellite data. I mean, to some degree, I'm woefully ignorant, right? I have to trust experts, and so I'm way out of my depth. But in general, I mean, I think there are certain things the federal government does that it does because states can't do them, right? We're probably better off with a federal tracking system for things that keep track of weather patterns rather than 50 state system. I mean, obviously. So, I mean, this is alarming if the experts that are complaining are right. I mean, that seems that we're endangering people, and I think in general, call me radical, but I think that's not great policy to give people less lead-in time for severe weather patterns and things like that. I mean, that just sounds really bad. But again, I mean, the government has answers for that, and I don't have enough information litigated out, but I mean, it sounds like something for concern. With regard to food banks, I mean, I think on some level I can see more of a philosophical argument for that, right? I think, look, the conservative argument tends to be, as Marshall said, right, that local folks should take care of their own, and that the further you get up the food chain, the worse things get. And that, I've heard conservatives say a lot of stuff like this too ought to just be done by churches, right? By religious nonprofits and things like this, by private sector charities and things like that. Now, regarding churches, the average congregation is about 87 members and is not very fiscally they're not rolling in dough to do all this stuff, right? So I mean, and then states, right, are often have unequal sort of budgets. In fact, I mean, I was just reading something from Time that was, and this is, not the first article like this I've seen where the data is basically that largely the blue states subsidize the red states, right? So, I mean, the blue states tend to pay much more into the federal government than they get back. And so it's just interesting, right? The conservatives, the red states who often are saying, hey, government's not a great thing, government is, big government's a big problem, they are happy taking subsidies that come from these godless, liberal blue states. So, I mean, I think that philosophically, though, I mean, you could argue that the federal government shouldn't be providing food for people, right? That this is just something the federal government shouldn't do. I mean, you could make an argument, I suppose, if you're a small government conservative, that this was nowhere in the vision of the founders, or that we'd have a federal government that was doing food distribution. I mean, I would argue that times change, and sometimes we're 50 states, and sometimes we're one big collective agent, and sometimes we need the collective agent to actually come to the aid of folks in the various localities and particularities that need basic things like food. So, I'm with Marshall. I think in general, pragmatically, I just think it's a bad idea to cut food banks. I think it's very good money. It's well spent, right? Practical, right? You're actually delivering something that people need tangibly, and I think it's a good thing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I wanted to hold my own feet to the fire a little bit because I said there have been a plethora of experts who have spoken out about the hurricane forecasting, and from several AP articles. I want to source 3 quotes very quickly. This is all AC. These are all Associated Press interviews. Mark Alessi, who's a science fellow at the Union of Concerned Scientists, quoted by the Associated Press: "If a hurricane is a day away from making landfall, it's nighttime. We will no longer be able to say this storm is definitely undergoing rapid intensification." Mike Lowry, hurricane specialist. Other microwave data will be available, but only roughly half as much, which will severely impede and degrade hurricane forecasts affecting tens of millions of Americans. And the third example is Brian McNulty, quoted by the Associated Press. He's University of Miami hurricane researcher. Microwave data are already I don't know why I can't read today. Microwave data are already relatively sparse, but to abruptly end 3 active functioning satellites is insanity. That may be sensationalism, but in fairness, it's sensationalism promulgated by the experts. Why they always accuse the news media for doing its job when the news media reports things people don't want reported is something I've, in all these years as being a reporter, I've never understood. Steve?
Yeah, Gary, let me go to the food bank thing first. As a general principle, I think that you're always going to have a segment of society that's going to be in need. I think you need to have some kind of way to take the edge off that if someone gets in a situation that they just can't feed themselves. But now I'll preface that with this caveat. You can overload a system like that without controlling your borders. Like we've seen Marshall's state being completely overrun. That type of blow into the country can add a strain to those type of systems that it's never intended to withstand. So I think it's got to be two-pronged. You take care of you take care of the people that's in need. You do what you can to facilitate and make sure no one in this country is starving. But then again, you have to have some kind of flow on the control of the flow on the demand side of this. You can't inject a large demand with a budget that wasn't intended to do that. To the satellite thing, it's my understanding that, like you referenced that one article, when it gets within a day of the shore, that by that time ground-based radar can start picking up the
and the hurricane hunters can fly.
Right, so you're not blind. I think that's a little hyperbole.
But when they're too far offshore, they can't
But that's
fly.
not a day, Gary. That's not a day out, like the guy was trying to say. If you're one day out off the coast, ground-based radar and hurricane hunters can reach that. You're talking more deep in the ocean. And, as someone that lived in a state in proximity to the coast for a number of years and went through quite a few hurricanes, let me tell you, as someone that's been through numerous hurricanes, I don't care if it's 120 mile an hour or 140 mile an hour wind. I'm going to get myself prepared. So, are we talking about the exact number on how many millibars of pressure drop we got? Or are we talking about wind speed? But for someone that's actually lived in a place that was prone to hurricanes, listen, I don't care if it's a Cat 2, Cat 3, and we had one come in on us that was Cat 4. If you live in that area, you don't have to do. It's not going to change your preparation for someone to say, "Oh my God, you got a Cat 4 instead of a Cat 3." I mean, you're going to be doing the same things because the effects, even though there's going to be varying degrees of intensity, the preparation and effects are going to be very similar. So I think we may be talking about a nuance here, and maybe if you want to be able to get the exact millibar drop, or you want to get the eye wall strength or the intensity, those things could be at play. But people who live in those areas, when they see that stuff coming in on it, if you've lived there any time at all, you know what you got to do. So I'll leave it there.
By the way, you might have missed this when I read it. So he didn't say a day away. He said a day away from making landfall, and it's nighttime. So that's a very important point.
I don't think nighttime would affect ground-based radar, would it?
It's not the ground-based radar that they use primarily. It's the hurricane hunters who cannot fly into the eye of the storm in the nighttime.
But it's my understanding when you get in that, if you're a day away and you say you got a storm, I think ground-based radar a day away could reach in and give you sufficient data to tell you whether you got a Cat 3 or Cat 4. But again, anyone that's ever lived where you get a lot of hurricanes, and we're like 70 miles off the coast, so we got a little cushion from the land, but we got plenty of them. Regardless whether it's Cat 3 or Cat 4, you're going to be preparing the same way. People that know will be preparing the same way.
I would say not. And to give you the best example that I know, and I live at the coast, and I also have probably lived through, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 hurricanes, because I was one of those idiots who got sent into the path of the hurricane to report on them as a national correspondent. So I was there before the hurricane arrived. I was on the radio telling people they should be evacuating. I was, I never had a problem finding a place to stay because everybody else was leaving. I managed to get through, obviously, all of them okay. But if you look at Katrina, which I covered, that was a massive freaking hurricane. massive, and we know the amount of damage that Katrina created. And we knew it was a massive hurricane long before it arrived, like at least a week, maybe more. And it gave everybody the opportunity, whether they availed themselves of the opportunity or not, because we know that FEMA ended up dropping the ball, to not only evacuate if they had the ability to do so, which folks that didn't have the ability to do so, the local government didn't provide them that ability. They could have. But the point was, they were given advance warning long before the hurricane made landfall, and they could have, should have, would have taken the proper precautions. And I'm not just talking about individuals. I'm talking about utilities. I'm talking about people who could help with evacuations. I'm talking about pre-positioning emergency response after the hurricane arrives. They knew how many, they should have known. They dropped the ball, but because of that,
our family are not food insecure. And Womack, he put an excellent point in the chat. Like, I may not drive a lot, but you may need to drive a lot. I'm paying taxes for the roads that
state and federal dropped the ball on that. The various, mainly church-based, but not all church-based. The Red Cross was in there as well, for example. But all of these disaster relief programs, they had all their people in place in advance. And I remember being there for Katrina, seeing the Baptists roll in, the Salvation Army roll in, the Red Cross roll in, and I'm thinking, where the hell is FEMA? Where the hell is FEMA? But the point is, Steve, they all had that advance information, so they knew to gear up. People knew to give their bosses notice. Hey, I got to take time off to go down there and volunteer on this hurricane that's coming in. It's mad, and everybody looked at the TV and they saw that it was huge. I think the ability to pre-warn with that kind of specificity, based on the interviews that I've heard with the meteorologists, is going to be diminished tremendously. And what are we saving by not analyzing the data? What's the gain? What's the gain by doing that, Steve?
Well, I'll just say this in relation to what you was talking about there. One of the things I was always acutely aware of during hurricane season in the area that I lived in, because there's some flooding areas, was the topography around me. I mean, that's just common sense. And the people in New Orleans, knowing that they're sitting there below sea level, knowing that you got a Cat 4, I think it was Cat 4 coming in on you, people like that didn't evacuate, I don't know what to tell them, because that's just crazy land. And if you're in that type of situation, and like I say, topography is important because you get massive amounts of rain off hurricanes. If you don't have some acumen into what your topography is and have some awareness of that as an individual, shame on you, because you're not doing your job as someone trying to look out for your family, and you should take precautions. I didn't need. We had I forget which one it was. I think it was in 87, 88. I can't remember this. So many came in when I lived in southern North Carolina. I lose track of them. But, when you'd see these things, you'd start thinking, okay, where am I at? What's the chance of flooding? What do I need? What do I need to have a plan? I didn't rely on the government, Gary. I mean, I know they can be some assistance, but I think if you're not acutely aware of these things, you do a disservice to yourself. If you think the government's going to save you in that situation, hold on, because you may be in trouble.
There's a really good joke Ron White tells about hurricanes. He's a comedian. And it goes about people staying behind during hurricanes. And he goes, there's this guy on South Beach who said that he did 1,000 sit-ups so he was prepared for the hurricane. Well, brother, it's not that the wind is a-blowing, it's what the wind is a-blowing. And if you get hit by a Volvo in your spleen, it doesn't matter how many sit-ups you did that day. I hope that adds a little levity. I think the joke is very funny.
So here's the thing about here's the thing about New Orleans. It was actually a Category 5 over the Gulf of Mexico. It was a category.
Yeah, I couldn't remember which one it was.
Yeah, but it was a Category 3 when it made landfall. And this was a water event more than it was a wind event in New Orleans. It was a wind event too, but it was the flooding that caused the most death and destruction.
Yeah, but
In the ninth ward of New Orleans, which was the hardest hit ward, it's a 34% poverty level in the ninth ward. Point being, the people, I spent time on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. People on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, by and large, although there are poor folks there too, had the means to get out of Dodge. There were a lot of people in New Orleans that did not have the means to get out of Dodge. They didn't have transportation. They didn't have money to purchase transportation. I recall seeing a yard full of school buses.
No, I was thinking of the exact same thing, Gary.
And they were flooded out. The school buses were flooded out because, well, nobody thought to evacuate the damn school buses. You could have taken those school buses and used those school buses to evacuate people to higher ground and save the school buses. Two wins with one shot. But they didn't.
But you know something, Gary? You know who primarily was responsible for the safety of their citizens there? It was the governor and the mayor.
I said the local state. I said the local, state, and federal level. I said all three failed. But I was there, and I know where the failings were, and I know on all three levels there was failure, and I know on all three levels they were pointing at the other two. I was there, I covered it, I remember all that. But the point is not how Katrina was responded to by government. The point was they had the information in hand that they should have responded in a better way than they did. Whether it's the fault of the governor or the mayor or Michael Brown, who headed FEMA, it doesn't really matter. They all dropped the ball. They all dropped the ball. But the next time we have a Katrina, and if the degree of the data is such that they cannot predict with the kind of accuracy they did the intensity of the storm, well, we won't be able to blame them for not doing their job because they didn't have the information at hand. So it's great for them. They don't have to do their.
No, I'd say this. I'd say that conventional radar could give you an indication of how severe something's going to be as far as the rain, wind speed. I think you're talking about very minute details within the forecasting, and the bigger picture of what's coming at you. You know, if you get a Cat 3 or you get a Cat 4 and you know you're going to get a lot of rain off this thing, you always do off hurricanes, and you know you're in a low-lying area, topography-wise. I mean, you don't need precision there. You just need a little common sense. Hey, it's time to get out of a place that's going to turn into a pond and call it good. But I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, so just a few comments. One, Marshall, I love hearing about your brother, but
probably congressional so much.
No, it's fine. I'm just saying, like, I think you might be overreading, how much to kind of buy into what a congressional staffer thinks. Because I understand it's your brother, but congressional staffers, and as somebody who's dealt with some congressional staffers, they typically have huge portfolios, and they don't really understand the workings of the executive. I mean, they're typically kids out of college with their campaign staff, whatever. So I would just kind of state that
not put
just to kind of think about it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. As far as this data, New York Times did some really interesting reporting on cuts in NHH or essentially health studies. And what they essentially came to is they kind of looked at all the grants and studies they were cutting at universities, and they figured out that they're kind of doing a control find and looking for words that they don't like. Diversity. They cut a bunch of grants out of a pool of money where the researcher was, disabled or whatever in studying, whatever. It's haphazard. They cut science. It's very bad. My thesis on this hurricane data is essentially the same thing. There's somewhere where the satellite's going to kind of collect climate data, is going to track it over time, and that's super bad for this administration. And that's why they did, what Marshall was talking about, the big beautiful bill, that's budgeting. This is essentially O&B cutting the rug on this data collection. It is terrible public policy, and this is why. Steve talked a lot about how you don't need a lot of data, and you don't need all this nuance and all this stuff to save lives. In actuality, you do. If you go back to the 1900 Great Galveston hurricane, it killed around 12,000 people. Why did it kill around 12,000 people? Because nobody knew it was coming, and it just hit them out of the blue. We have made great strides in hurricane prediction, and it actually does matter a hell of a lot how accurate those paths are, because as somebody who has also lived in a hurricane area, you kind of get fatigued from evacuating, and people stop evacuating. Every time a hurricane comes up, you tell them the world's going to end, it's going to hit you directly. The more accurate these paths are, the more data you can share with people exactly who's in danger and exactly who should evacuate. And as far as a life-saving measure, we don't know the bounty that the modern world has given, because we are in a world in which we have it so good, but we're tearing down. We're essentially tearing down what has given us that life-saving data, and it's a shame. And all because, and my thesis would be, they're going to dare collect some data that might support that the global climate is changing. I think it's short-sighted, and I think it's gone down.
By the way, nobody is, as far as I can tell, has argued that, or publicly estimated how much the government expects to save by shutting off the processing of the microwave sensors. I can cite how much is saved as a result of NOAA forecasting, which is not just the microwave sensors that are no longer going to be analyzed, but overall. I'm looking at a news article that cites a 2024 American Meteorological Society study that estimates that for every $1 invested in NOAA forecasts, $73 are saved. And I see another analysis here that says that advancements in predicting wind speeds which rely on data that includes microwave observations, includes, not exclusively, have generated about $5 billion in savings per hurricane. Now, I'm just reading the top of this analysis. I'm not going to get into the details of it because it's just, I don't have time to read it. You don't want to hear me read it. But just suffice to say, there are great savings to be made to insurance payoffs potentially, to lives potentially. I don't see a justification for doing this. I don't see how we're saving any money by doing this.
Well, just to add to that, this sort of science subsidizes the sort of lifestyle people have come to expect on the coast. This, along with federal flood insurance, is why you can have the built-up areas in Florida and don't, have a Galveston, Texas every few years. And to just kind of rip it down and say the nuances don't matter, it doesn't matter that the meteorologist can tell you if a storm's going to hit Tampa or going to hit the Panhandle. That stuff matters a great deal in getting people out of danger. The accuracy of those tracks, the accuracy of those wind speeds, help cities like Tampa know when to evacuate and how to evacuate and how much to evacuate. And it's just the height of stupidity to just tear this down because of a big boogeyman that I suspect is climate change.
Well, that may or may not be the motivation for it. That's an interesting proposition. Thank you, Brent. Alan, you're up.
Good. How are you this evening, Gary?
I'm good. Sorry I didn't give you a heads up, but
That's okay.
You already noticed it, so.
I'm going to answer your question, then I have two small points of order, if you will indulge me. First of all, the answer on the weather thing is absolutely terrible public policy. I can't agree with Steve. I think if the government doesn't do it, who else is going to do it? There is no excuse. It's just plain dumb. And it may well be about global warming, but whether it is or isn't, I'm with you. I see no justification. Now, I'm in California. We have earthquakes. If we were talking about predicting earthquakes, I could imagine an argument that says we don't currently have that facility. Why should we invest in it? But since this is already here, why are we taking it away? It makes absolutely no sense. Now, so I disagree with Steve on that one, but I am going to agree with Steve, and some who think of me as a progressive may be surprised, but I actually think there is a justification to the food bank reduction, and Scott covered it a little bit. We want to talk about what good people we are, and Biden used to say we are great because we're good. Well, Anson often says, and I think with great justification, that government can only do what people are willing to pay for it to do. These people on the right, particularly religious people, want to be all gung-ho about abortion, and yet they don't want to take responsibility for the life that's created. And I would say this is the same thing, that maybe it does make sense for government to say there is a limit to what we can provide in terms of food, and we are going to leave this to the religious communities and see if we really are good. Let's throw that challenge open. And to some extent, I really blame George W. for this problem, because his idea of compassionate conservatism was really taking a charter away from something that had been typically in religious communities. Now, I do want to mention that my brain trust this evening at 7 p.m. Eastern is going to talk about the Great Divide. We are recording this room, Gary, and I would love to know from you why, Scott had a terrific thing on St. Augustine the other day, and I was frustrated that I couldn't go back and listen to it. Why have you chosen not to record your
Well, it's for personal reasons that I don't really want to get into right now. But
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you on a phone call if you really
I'd love to know, and yes, I would love to. So yes, let's do that sometime.
So it's interesting when you said this. You made this comment about the philosophy that government ought not to do it, but the churches will do it. But the churches apparently don't step up enough. Some of them do, but not enough, and they can't do it on their own apparently. And the food banks are like the churches, I guess, right? Anecdotally, it means nothing, but I want to just give you an example of a fellow I know who absolutely believed exactly what you articulated. This is not the job of government. This is the job of the churches. That's how it used to be before, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that's how it should be today. This is stupid. I don't want my tax dollars being used to help people who are too lazy to go out and get a job. That was his philosophy. I'm not saying it's yours. I'm saying that was his. That was all well and good until the guy who ran his own little business and he became ill and he fell onto hard times and no longer could provide for himself. Guess where he went to for help? He's in subsidized housing.
Yep.
And they deliver him his food. He's all of the things that he railed against when he was making money. And by the way, he was making a lot of money at one time. There was an overhead to his business, so a lot that went in went back out. But he was bringing in a lot of revenue at one time, and then things went sour in his business, and then his health got bad. And it wasn't for lack of fortitude on his part. It was not for a lack of him not having those strong Protestant Christian values of rolling up your sleeves and working tilling the fields from dawn to dusk. He was of that ilk, and he had such strong disdain. I remember pulling up to a food cart with him. I was in his car, and he says, "Hey, there's this great food cart." Yeah. So he pulled up, and there was a guy outside the food cart begging for money. And he looked at him and he says, "Get a job, Pops." Well, guess what? He's now that guy. And so you got to have a safety net, I think, because not everybody's going to be able to get out of Dodge when the hurricane comes, or be able to grow food in their backyard if they even have a backyard, and and then can it and save it for the winter and all that kind of stuff. We're not that kind of a society any longer, and people don't have those skills,
But Gary, I want to push back on that for a second. This food and medicine are different than education. Education is about the future. It's about how our children are going to have a society tomorrow. But medicine and food, when do you stop? When do you say there's enough quality? And there's this conflation between what is individual responsibility and what is government responsibility. And so I'm not necessarily believing exactly what I'm saying. I'm not this cruel, but I'm saying if Anson is right, that it's more important to have guns than butter. Let's just put it that way for a brief thing. Maybe the thing that Donald Trump has done for us is forced us not to take such things for granted, and maybe people need to, in the short run, experience a little bit of seeing people starving and so forth before they recognize the great things we have.
Wow, interesting. And by the way, we're at 5:55, so we won't add anybody to the stage, but everybody on the stage will get an opportunity to speak.
Hey Gary, happy Monday. I don't have a lot to add. I did want to maybe just say I did put some information in the chat on food banks and specifically the largest food bank network in the United States. It's called Feeding America. I put some information in there. It has raised about $4.9 billion. Has a 4-star charity rating for 10 years in a row. On its board of directors are, I think, the vice chairman of Walmart, vice chairman of Morgan Stanley, Fortune 100 type people, all supporting food safety here in the United States. Feeding America takes $0 from the federal government. So 100% privately funded. And it does partner with SNAP and other USDA or programs. So I just wanted to put a word out there in support of the kind of work that is being done, Gary. Long Island, where I live, has a food bank established in 1980 by former singer Harry Chapin. I don't know if you remember him, Gary.
Of course.
Okay, so Harry started the food bank, and I have been lucky enough to have founded a food pantry, which is aligned with the food bank. They provide us with distributed food. All of these organizations are privately funded.
All the ones to which you refer.
To which I refer, and I know of, which includes other communities on Long Island and whatnot, food pantries, run by, in my case, local citizens who volunteer, sit on a board of directors, that hand out bags of food on every Tuesday afternoon, and do that kind of work. Do that kind of community work. So I just want to put a word out there for those guys who do that kind of work all across the country, who are privately funded and have been doing so, well, let's say 1980. Yeah, well, that would be like 45 years. A long time. So there's a lot of work that's being done. The government, USDA and SNAP, or programs that the federal government funds. But this other work is equally important, and I wanted to make a point of it.
Thank you, Dominic. So when I was in Detroit, I participated as a grunt in the Meals on Wheels program, delivering food to shut-in seniors in Detroit. And I never thought about who funded it. So as you were talking, I looked it up. So that particular program receives about 35% of its funding from the Federal Older Americans Act Nutrition Program that's administered through the state. But it goes from the federal government to the state and then down to the Meals on Wheels program, and then the meals get loaded up into my car and I deliver it to the old folks' homes when I was there. So I have no idea whether the spring, I've not been in touch with those folks in decades. I don't even know who those folks are now running these programs today. But it would be instructive to me to find out whether their ability to service the senior community in Detroit has been diminished by the spring cut. I mean, this is the thing. It's always the damnation is in the details. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of things. And
I would just make the quick point.
I would just to complete my point first, Dominic, I would be very upset based on my personal biased history because of my alliance with that program if I heard that Of course, those folks that I was delivering meals to are no longer around. But the ones who are now, who were younger then, obviously, I would be very upset if I learned that the Detroit Meals on Wheels program, to which I was a part, was no longer able to feed as many senior citizens as it did then. I can't see how anybody could say that those people could fend for themselves, nor that we should turn our backs on them. But go ahead.
I was just going to make the distinction between prepared meals, which is what you were talking
Yes.
about, which is completely distinct from food banks and food pantries. So I just
You're talking about Meals on Wheels, right?
the devil's in the details. You know,
Dominic's on I am, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's tracking.
You're welcome. I'm going to check further to see whether the program that funds Detroit, the Older Americans Act nutrition program, was cut to. So, like I say, we're getting into the nitty-gritty. Agent, you're...
Sorry about that. How are you, Gary? It's good to be here.
Well, now that I'm able to put a complete sentence together without stumbling, I'm doing fine. A little earlier, not so good.
It's good to be with you. I'm not an expert on these cuts that are happening, but I'll tell you my insight. The food bank thing, I don't know enough about it. I volunteered at some food banks. I'm not quite sure how important the federal funding for food, I mean, that seems pretty high level. And, you know, I know they talk about food deserts and so forth, and I think there's a big problem with the nutrition, and I know Robert Kennedy's trying to address, you know, us not poisoning ourselves with sugar and chemicals and hormones and all kinds of things, but, you know, I don't have, no one's dying for lack of calories at the moment in the United States. But on this hurricane data thing is interesting. I saw a headline the other day about AI being used to do weather prediction now. And this is, I think, being pioneered by some of the big tech companies. And if we're talking about cuts to federal funding for infrastructure or analyses or personnel or so forth to do with weather, data gathering and analysis, I have to wonder for a second. It's like, how many satellites in near Earth orbit now do we have? I think it's in the tens of thousands maybe, or it's at least in the thousands that, for instance, just SpaceX has in orbit. Amazon has a new program, they almost tired me, for putting the same types of satellites in orbit. Lots of other companies are running satellites. So my point is, I think early days, when the cost of capital and the cost of the profit, and when there's a clear public good argument for some programs, it makes sense for the federal government to be, you know, the provider, to make these like tens or hundreds of billions of dollars in investment to get a new technology off the ground, and to provide that public good to everyone. But I think once the cost gets low enough that it almost just falls out. I mean, in a sense, weather data is almost just like an artifact of some of the other data that I know all these tens of thousands of satellites are already gathering. And all you have to do is connect that data, which a lot of the big tech companies are doing on their own anyway, because they have profit motive to know about, you know, for their own machinations, to be able to predict the future, to be able to predict the weather, and therefore to maximize their own profits. My point is, I think we're well past the era that we need to rely on the federal government to gather and analyze this data, and actually private players are doing it in a much more sophisticated way already, and in many cases just giving it away to us for free. It's like nothing for them. And so, like, the path of the hurricane, I mean, we're not in the 1940s anymore. We're in the 2020s, and we have the technology that's practically ubiquitous is so much more powerful. And I therefore am skeptical of bureaucracies that may have been created in the 1940s to solve these types of problems, and whether or not they're actually providing the maximum value to the taxpayer at this in 2025, and certainly in 2030. I'll be very surprised if we still need them for this specific things. There are other things you can make arguments for, but I'm not too worried that I won't know what the hurricane's going to hit or something like this. I think we've got that solved in a much more sophisticated way than we ever did.
Again, I question then why are all these meteorologists and scientists arguing otherwise? But the answer to your question is 19,000.
But do they have a financial incentive to say that?
What would the financial incentive be?
If they're a meteorologist who's getting one way or another getting federal money into their pockets.
Yeah, but that's not exactly that investment. Don't get me wrong. Okay, as I said, my other brother's not too concerned about that, at least from his vantage point. But NOAA does serve an important purpose, and having to get it from a private source means, number one, they don't have the exact same resources at their disposal. But number two, it's going to have a subscription fee. NOAA has no subscription fee, and keeping NOAA as the Oceanographic and Atmospheric Service is good for us. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you can't, Jackson, not right now. I'm not saying you can't make cuts in government programs. I am saying I don't think the idea of simplifying it down to let's just do it private is a very good idea. The private sector is not going to share that stuff unless there's some sort of a profit motive. And you need weather data for the military that doesn't have anything to do with profit motive. Granted, they have their own weather service, but they do use NOAA as one to take off of. So, while I understand where you're coming from, the Department of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Service does do invaluable work for the U.S. government and saves us a lot of money in subscriptions every year.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Agent. Agent is 19,000. 11,400 of them are still active. The other 7,000 plus are space junk. But 19,000, I don't know. At a certain point, that's a problem as well. They have to, when they do space launches, I think they have to take all that into consideration now. David.
You should Google the word Kessler syndrome.
Okay. Okay. I will. I'm interested in that. David.
Yeah, great discussion. I think the title is another title that really doesn't really need to be answered in a way that I think it's obvious that this isn't good policy. Considering the level of global warming that's going on, climate change, the impact on lives, property, the ability of the American people to respond, making decisions based upon how soon do we evacuate, how much damage is going to happen. I think there's a whole host of things that the government provides that can be monetized on behalf of the taxpayer. And just basic good safety policy. We talked in the room about the FAA and air traffic controllers. I mean, it's just good policy to have seasoned, experienced people manning the ship, manning the air flights without any downtime, without any question, without any private sector gap filling that may not have the same incentive to do the job that the seasoned professionals and government workers have. The food bank issue, to me, I mean, we're talking about the dance between church and government and the public-private sector. Well, there's one religion that I know of that's done a phenomenal job of backstopping these kinds of things, and that's the Latter-day Saints, based out of Salt Lake City, Utah.
also known as the Mormons, they have a massive network of bishop storehouses, farm to table, farm to warehouse. They've got reserves. When Katrina happened, they deployed hundreds of volunteers and food and whatnot to the sites faster than I think FEMA was providing it at the time. If we recall the confusion and all the stuff that was happening there with regard to delivery, and we had George W. telling Brown he was doing a great job when he really wasn't. But the Mormons learned from the Great Depression, and they've also learned from a history of being outcasted by the United States government, which forced them in the state of Utah. But they also teach a level of self-reliance. The bishop storehouses, which is what they're called, when people go there for food, they put a program in place to get people back to work. They figure out what their budgets are. If there's elderly involved, they make sure they're fed. But this is an organization, Gary, that doesn't want to leave anything to chance, whereby they're at the beck and call of the United States government to serve their members' needs and their members' families' needs. So, again, I'm not doing a plug for them, and I'm not trying to promote their religion at all. But they have been exemplary in their history of how they see the most beneficial aspects of taking care of their congregation. And of course, if all hell in a handbasket breaks loose, the other thing they used to teach was that every member should have a year's supply of storage in their houses and their basements to be ready for any situation that could happen where you may not be able to feed your family. So I think there's a level of self-reliance there that I think the nation can learn from. But that being said, there's still a massive amount of poverty in this country, housing insecurity, food insecurity. It breaks my heart to see our government debate, whether or not children should receive school lunches and vouchers. Where we have the restaurant industry, the food industry, restaurant industry throwing away billions of dollars of food every year because they have to, because of state and local laws regarding perishable items. So there's a whole host of waste there that I think we could capture somehow and be less wasteful on that front. And then, of course, with regard to the folks that pick our food, the farm workers, in the great state of California, where I live, where half of all farm workers, or close to it, are undocumented, we're now running into the insecurity of not being able to get this food picked in a timely manner before it rots and spoils in the orchards and the vines and the ground and so forth. So how much is that going to cost the nation? So
you're saying in the aggregate, the food insecurity problem is now being compounded?
That's my argument, absolutely. I would say that very accurately. It's going to be compounded. Not just compounded, but also higher prices being raised. So a family of four going to the grocery store, does the mother cut back on fresh produce that might be going up in cost because it's too expensive in lieu of something more processed and all that? So there's also the health of the nation that could be impacted by these rising costs in terms of feeding your family with the best possible produce out there and food out there. And then, of course, I think if you can feed people and keep them fed, you're going to cut down on medical costs because their health isn't going to decline, right? If you got to go out and eat fast food at $5, $10 a pop just to not starve, well, that's the worst food on the planet you can put inside your body. So what does that do to the health of the nation and its workforce and whatnot? So, those are my thoughts, Gary, on that front. So yeah, no, we should not get rid of that. Yeah.
Thank you, David Les.
So I learned a lot by listening to folks before me, and some of what I'm going to say has been said before. Very important is, in terms of hurricanes, is the ratio of false reports. You're telling people to go evacuate versus correctly versus non-correctly. And the more you get it right, the more people listen to you. That's the same way with anything, right? If I give you advice and it turns out to be good, I'm going to people are going to listen to me versus if I am wrong too much of the time, calling fire when there isn't really one. And that's where data comes in, and we need to be able to improve knowing where this thing's going to land. And we have the computer power now to do that, but we also need perhaps better data to go into our models so we can predict better who should be evacuating and who should not.
So I've always said, Les, having covered, like I said, 8, 9, 10 hurricanes. I guess I'd have to go back and try to remember them all, but a lot of hurricanes. I've come to the conclusion, and obviously this is not something to be taken literal, that hurricanes have a mind of their own. So you could predict landfall is going to be at a certain location, and then it's like the hurricane is listening to these news reports and saying, well, I'm going to fool you, and then at the last second banks into a different direction and makes landfall elsewhere. And so it's really kind of inexact. So I think actually your point is that we need more data, not less. And I think that what I just explained lends credibility to your.
Well, yes, and weather used to be more capricious, and then we had better modeling of the weather, and now I am just shocked. I can get the hour by hour prediction of what the weather's going to be, and I can have a 10-day forecast that is accurate. And so technology can help there. In terms of the food banks, I would like to, I should say one more thing about hurricanes. And that is, I recall Brian Williams became famous for his coverage of Katrina, but it was all very, how horrible the people there were. He was in this, the population was acting like savages or something like, he was in this, what was it, this...
the Superdome?
Superdome, thank you. And his reporting there, when you look back on it, was terrible.
Well, I can't comment on his reporting because I was down there and I had no access to television. I was sleeping on the tarmac of Louis Armstrong Airport. I had no idea what my colleagues were reporting, but it was a bad situation in the Superdome.
Right, it was a bad situation, but wasn't because people were, just going into the law of the jungle, which is the kind of stuff he was putting out.
I think some of that did happen. I think there was very little security, no policing. There were a lot of New Orleans cops who did not report for duty. They evacuated. So there was a shortage of cops. It was really an extremely chaotic situation. I can't even begin to describe to you how chaotic it was in both the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, where I was, and in New Orleans, which I was there for 3 weeks. So I'm very familiar with there were no landmarks in some cases.
Yeah,
no street signs. It was unbelievable.
And he was just reporting on speculations that turned out not to be true.
I'll have to go back and see that because I did not hear that information was inaccurate, but it might have been. But go ahead on the food bank.
And I'd just like to say, in terms of food bank, out here, I think a lot of places, a place called the Second Harvest, and it's the idea of gleaning. You have food that, they take off the shelves for one reason or another. It's still good, but maybe there's too much of this for the demand or whatever. And also the government used to subsidize the prices of some commodity, and then that food was distributed to these food banks as well. And the companies do it because they're nice, but some folks also do it, and this is not bad. But there are, the government subsidizes it by having tax write-off. So it is costing taxpayers in the sense that somebody's got to make it goes and it either increases the deficit, so either you got to pay more taxes now to make up for it, or your children will have to pay it in the future. And it's not a bad system, but I'm just saying that we are, the government is paying for it in the sense that these companies aren't paying what they would normally pay for all the government services. They don't have to pay the same tax rate that they would have paid without the write-off.
So Les, I'm looking right now with regard to the Superdome, and it's really ironic because, as I said, I was there, but I was never in the Superdome. So I was unaware of whether the reporting was accurate or inaccurate. You're absolutely right that it was inaccurate. It's all been debunked subsequently. There were two investigations, one by the New York Times and a review by the LA Times, that found that the more sensational claims were unfounded. There were no sexual assaults, but sexual assaults were reported. There were no gun battles, but gun battles were reported. There were no multiple homicides. In fact, only one verified death, but that guy committed suicide by jumping from an upper level. There were problems there, a lot of problems. It was overcrowded. There were 30,000 people there. The heating system went down. The medical supplies were limited, and the number of people there to help the people were limited. But this exaggeration of how people were treating one another while huddled in the Superdome, and I did not know until today that was untrue. So I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. That's really extremely
Yeah, so I was surprised too. And as you know, Brian Williams was disgraced for making crap up for a different story.
right. That he was on a military airplane that flew into enemy fire or something like that.
Right. And
I've never understood why a guy who reaches that stature. I mean, I've never understood the exaggeration by reporters to put themselves, make them. This is why you're not supposed to be you're not supposed to be the story. You're supposed to be reporting the story. You're not supposed to be the story. And it's not about you. Even if that plane came under fire, it's not about you being so brave as to have gone through that. The story is that this is what our military has to endure. It's not about Brian Williams. At any rate, I know some people do that. We're all human, and you're going to have frailties among journalists as well. But once you reach a certain stature, why would you do that unless you've been doing it all along, that it becomes just second nature to you to do it? That's absolutely stupid what he did. But he's not the only one. I mean, we know that Hillary Clinton lied about her and her daughter coming under fire on the tarmac of a military base once and stuff like that. And Joe Biden embellished a little minor fire in his house in Delaware. And these embellishments erode public confidence in journalism and in government. It's, and by the way, not all of the misrepresentation of what occurred in New Orleans came from the minds of the journalists. a lot of that was it came from the mouths of the New Orleans officials into the ears of the journalists. So there's that.
Well, I want to tell you, you asked, why did Brian Williams do this starting when he was, big guy? And as we just saw, that's how he became a big guy. He made up sensational stories that got him on the air. And also, he looked like an anchor.
Right, yeah, right. He was typecast very well. Look, I know a guy. I'm not going to say his name. He's still in the business, but he did a story where a guy he was reporting. And by the way, it's accurate that this was happening in Detroit at the time. That people in public would be shooting up during the heroin craze. I've seen it myself. Driving down the street, I've seen people on street corners shooting up in public view. They're so whacked out they don't care where they are while they're shooting up. I've actually recently seen it. Recently, meaning in the last, 4 or 5 years, somebody had his works out and was shooting up in a subway station in Midtown Manhattan. It happens. But what this guy did, he ended up paying these guys to shoot up on camera for him. He paid them. He paid them to shoot up on camera. And when the story came out, I think he even won an award for going into the gang-infested neighborhood of Detroit and bravely, with his crew, capturing this. And then it came out that he had paid and he got discredited. But guess what? He didn't lose his job. And in fact, he went on to bigger and better things. I would never hire a guy like that. Never. Well, you're done, as far as I'm concerned, for doing that. So I know it happens. And it shouldn't happen, but it does on occasion. I was unaware of Brian Williams reporting at all. I mean, I was there, and he was there, but I'm sure he was unaware of my reporting as well. Thank you, Les. Brian, and then Bam gets the last word. Brian.
Hey, Gary. Bottom line, I think both of them are necessary programs, and here's what convinced me. First of all, what everybody, I think, so far from what I heard, is getting wrong about the weather information, and I think you did touch on it, is it's microwave information. And this microwave information is the same kind of microwave that we have in our microwave ovens, and they can't just get this anywhere. This is coming from the Department of Defense. And what this does is it measures the water in these storms. So, when you were talking about, I forgot what they were called, surprise morning storms or something you were mentioning, that detects the amount of water and whether that storm is going to blow up, whether it's it might come in a certain category and then blow up to a higher, it measures, basically it just measures the water in the storms, and that type of information is unique that they were getting it from the Department of Defense. The articles I read didn't mention any other alternatives to that. I mean, there may be out there. I don't know of them if there is, but it did led me to believe that information they were getting from the Department of Defense was unique. And the Trump administration is citing cybersecurity reasons for not giving it out to the NOA anymore, and also budget and layoffs. The food bank, at first I was like, there's all kinds of food banks. There's food stamps, I don't know, not sure what the big deal is on that, but I did some reading up on it, and there's two main programs, and forgive me because I forgot the name of them, that are canceled. And what they're actually not only are food banks, but they provide healthy food and meat and vegetables to schools for school lunches. And this program is twofold. Not only does it provide it to the banks and to the schools, but it also buys it from local farmers. So you're providing these farmers a market for their food and providing them a job and income, and the food is going to a good place. And you really hate to see that type of food not go to the schools, for our children. You a lot of children, they don't get a good meal at home, and that's one reason that the schools the school districts try to provide them a good meal. And you really hate to see this stream of food not be provided to our children, and let alone people that need it. And another reason the food bank part was important is that I was reading that food stamps, although you might qualify, they don't provide you enough. You might fall short by the end of the month or something, or you may not be able to buy that. I didn't quite understand that, but you might not be able to buy the same kind of food that you get from the food bank. Fills in the gaps, so to speak. So there is a purpose for it, and I do have know some folks that do receive the SNAP program, and I do that they live in a different state, but I do recall them saying that they go to the church food banks, sometimes because they either need something that they couldn't buy because they ran out by the end of the month or whatever. But I think that all of these things are good, and what really upsets me is it's we're not. They want to cut the deficit, but they're taking away these valuable things that help people, but yet give tax breaks to the rich, and it's just not a balanced way to do things. And
I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but the first most expensive thing in the federal ledger is in fact social programs. 3 of them: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Well, I don't know why you and the government want to call Social Security a social program when people pay into that all their lives that they work. And the rich people, they stop paying out of their income at a certain rate. So rich people really get a pass once they get over a certain amount. It's not a social program. It's a pension that we've paid into all of our lives, been taken out of our check, not even voluntarily.
Yes, and if we don't figure out a way to solve it, it's going to run out of money.
Well, that don't make it a social program, and it pisses me off when people call it one. It's not freaking welfare. It's not welfare. It's not welfare.
You are arguing against what the president who put this in place was. He argued that it was a social welfare program in 32. That was what he argued. If you don't like
how in the hell can it be a social program when it was taken out of my income all my life and paid into that program? That's a pension. That's not a welfare program. I'm not going out there handing for handouts. I don't care what anybody call it. It's not a social program. You don't pay out of your pocket all your life for a social program.
It's defined as a social program in government.
Well, it's wrong.
Not just government speak, but in law. Well,
it's wrong.
You think it's wrong. You think it's wrong.
So when I get my pension from work, that's so when I retire from work, I'm getting a social program from work. That's bullshit. You don't know what they may call it that, but it's not true.
Private sector pension plan, is that fine?
It's the exact same thing. I paid into it, and the money compounds. And the Social Security would be there if Congressman had got their ass in there and started robbing from it.
Well, here's the point. The point is, Marshall said there are 3 areas that are the highest expenditure of government money. But the distinction that I think Brian is making is that Social Security is not government money. It's not tax money. It's the person's money that he or she put into the system. It's not tax money.
I don't disagree with you, but I would tell you that the Republican and Democratic leaders in both the House and Senate have disagreed.
No.
They've robbed the trust fund to the tune of about $4 trillion over about a decade. And their excuse for it is that it's intergovernmental borrowing. So you can rob Peter to pay Paul and make Social Security go bankrupt in 2034 because Dick Armey and someone else like Nancy Pelosi I'm only referencing her because she was speaker for a long time, ended up doing that, right? They robbed us to the tune of about $4 trillion. To put that in perspective, that is 4 World Trade Centers built entirely out of $100 bills. That's what $1 trillion is. And we've been spending it that way. My point, Brian, is that regardless of what you think, those social programs, as defined by FDR, we call them social programs, they eat up the first line in federal expenditures. The next one is the interest on our debt. The third one is the military. And the fourth one is everything else we spend.
But anyway, what does that have to do with what we were talking about in the first place, though, which was the food bank and the weather?
You got off on
Not sure how you got off on that.
I got there by noting that when you're talking about the government cutting money, that it would make sense that the government would look at the largest line item to cut.
Well, these really aren't, comparatively though, what we're talking about today are not very big line items, really. Not much that the DOGE cut was really large.
Well, especially with regard to the satellites. Those are Department of Defense satellites. They're not going to deactivate them. So the satellites are still gathering whatever information they are gathering, not just weather information, I suspect, but who knows. They're not going to deactivate it. And I bet you, dollars to donuts, the microwave information is still being analyzed because they need to know for troop movement and to where to put our ships safely based on hurricanes. So I bet it's not like they're going to turn a blind eye to the information up there. They're just not going to make it available to NOAA to make it available to the general public. So if I'm correct in my assumption, and I acknowledge what I just stated was an assumption, then why do you do it? Why do you do it? What gain is there? The other things that this administration has done, the cuts that they've made, they make an argument that people may agree with. Some people may disagree with their argument on why to do it. I still don't see the reason why they want to cut information that could save property and lives. Why? And I don't think anybody has been able to explain that, even those who took to the stage to say that it
was cybersecurity and budget.
I don't understand the cybersecurity issue.
Then what do you mean by budget, Ryan?
No, well, saving money.
I don't think that was. They never even said how. They've never said how the money would be saved. They never said how much money would be saved. So you could say all you want. I'm doing this because it saves money. That doesn't make it so. So
but that's
if in fact it's saving money, then is it not incumbent upon the government to explain to me, who lives along a coast, why they are trying to, where they're saving money, how much money is being saved, so that I have an understanding of why they make my life at greater risk today than it was yesterday, literally?
Right.
I mean, how would require reading a federal directive for OMB on why they collect back the money in the first place?
It would require the government answering that question. You don't think this question...
What I was going to say was I'm fairly certain in order to get an answer, you would have to submit a FOIA. I don't think you can get an answer out of the Trump administration without submitting a FOIA.
Well, whether submitting a FOIA would be successful or not is not the issue. The issue is, why have they not explained this to the American people? The only answer they say is that the news media are sensationalizing the issue. That's their answer.
It didn't readily explain stuff. It didn't readily explain stuff under Bill Clinton, and neither George W. Bush, neither Obama.
Well, we're not talking about Bill Clinton.
Well, no. My point is, there are lots of administrations that don't provide that kind of rationale, that it's rather more...
Well, we're not talking about those administrations today. And we won't be talking about the Trump administration. The next generation of chief executives. We'll be talking about that generation of chief executives. I guarantee you that if this forum is still alive, I will make this pledge. You can write this down and throw it in my face, that if the next president of the United States is a Democrat, and people come up to the stage when we are critiquing that Democratic governor, that Democratic president, and say, but Trump did that, I'm going to shut him up. I don't care what Clinton did, because it has nothing to do with our discussion at hand. If Clinton did something,
exercise the same behavior.
no, it doesn't. So true wrongs make a right.
No. I didn't say true wrongs make a right. I said it's the normal way the presidency is functioning. My life.
Define normal. So if it's normal, we shouldn't critique it, because it's normal.
No, I think critiquing normal things is a good idea.
Oh, okay. Then why did you bring it up in the first place?
Why did I bring it up with Brian in the first place? I felt like it was important to make the distinction when talking about cutting money, that one of the places one should look is the top expenditure in the federal budget, regardless of whether we like what that means or not. I don't.
So let me answer your question. Let me answer your question based on the philosophy that you're trying to articulate, and see if this holds water, or if I'm totally misunderstanding your point of view. So if under President Trump, he authorizes the extrajudicial killing of an American citizen on foreign land at the hands of our military, and that is criticized, the response to that criticism should be, well, Obama did it, so it's normal. So that just shuts up all criticism of current presidents. For sure, if we're going to do that with all of the transgressions by this president, the subsequent presidents are indemnified from criticism. Indemnified, because anything a future president does, well, at least it's not Trump. Look what Trump did. Look what Trump did.
I didn't say they were indemnified, Gary. I simply think it's important to point out that the Trump administration is not unique in the way they're exercising this. That probably the better criticism is that this is the way the system is functioned as a whole, and it's unhealthy overall. But that it is normal. It's a normal that we shouldn't have, but it is normal. And my point in saying that is, the presidents, every president, references in legal opinions the person who was president before them.
But I'm not a president. But I'm not a president, and I'm not a president. Neither are you. So okay, name one program that Bill Clinton cut without explaining to the American people why that program was cut. Name one.
Medicare. He argued that he cut about 50%, but all he really did was cut about 50% of 1% of spending.
And he cut Medicare, and he did not explain why he cut Medicare?
He cut Medicare, and he didn't explain properly how he cut it.
Oh, properly. He cut it properly. But he did offer an explanation.
He cut it and made it sound like he was cutting 50% of something.
But he gave but he did give an explanation. He was disingenuous.
An explanation, but yes, an explanation.
And so what was his explanation? Not for the amount, but for why he cut Medicare.
Getting in line with Gingrich, but this is my childhood, so I can.
Okay, but you brought up Clinton, not me. So that's why I'm asking you, Clinton. So he did give an explanation. It may not have been a satisfactory explanation, but he did give an explanation, right?
Sure, Gary, but if we analyze the Clinton presidency, I'm absolutely 100% positive we can find areas in which Clinton did not explain things to the American public. Like, okay. I don't mistake my position for being one of one, because it's not. I don't want the world to be like that. But the world is like that.
I know, but Marshall, we cannot critique a current president under the cloud of, well, if we critique a current president, Marshall's going to say, well, this is normal because so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so did it.
Just because it's normal doesn't mean it doesn't need reform, Gary.
Then why do you bring it up? What's the purpose of bringing it up?
Because the Trump administration is often lifted up as an example of a president that is unlike any other president.
Nobody has said that today in the course of this discussion. So why do you bring it up then? Nobody has said that. Nobody said that only Donald Trump has done something like this. Maybe they think it, but nobody has said it. Nobody's articulated.
Because the emphasis has been on the Trump administration.
Because the Trump administration is the administration in power and making these decisions.
I don't disagree. Decisions are not simply in a vacuum. They are able to use their predecessors' reasoning for what they do. If I had my way and I could wave a magic wand, I would tell you that it's normal, but that it needs to stop right now.
So are you going to bring this up every time there's a critique of the president that previous presidents did things?
If it is one in which I feel like we're focusing in on the administration to the detriment of previous administration's tone setting, sure. I don't feel like I need to bring that up every time. But if we are using the Trump administration as an exemplar of things that are not going right or should not be done, it does help to know whether that was behavior that happened to the presidency previously or whether it was not. You can then take that behavior, even if it's normal, and say, guys, this has been considered normal for quite a long time. It shouldn't be. We need to do something different.
I don't see how it advances. I don't see how it advances the conversation with specifically the topic at hand by doing this. That's like saying if my neighbor is a criminal and did something that's heinous, and we're discussing it. Well, yeah, but this guy did something too, and the other one did something too. We're not talking about what the other person did. We're talking about what this person
Gary,
did.
it's not about that. It's about the use of power. If it wasn't objected to under 3 or 4 different presidencies, then why are we objecting to it now?
Now we get to the heart of the matter. Now we get to the heart of the matter. What is the use of us critiquing the current president if what the current president does is normal? Maybe I'll make that the subject of tomorrow's discussion. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. So until 5 p.m. New York time tomorrow for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
مرحبا لبنان فيكم يترى فرسي ولا مش يترى؟
No, أنا تزاريبا سوري إني ساقط المية وخينا مسلني لا يفلتكم يساقي زانو.
أوكي يسلمكم.
مرحبا. وعقدوا دحين زم مهران. سوري يساق وأنا دي سوري يساق. لحدن دي. اللي يعمل عبد ما نقدر صار هاون دقدر فهم. ماني نيرو تسعن حادن انت قبلك عدلي ولا أبقال سيد أبقال سيد بوليتيكا وطلقا نتاي نيرو إزبا وطلقوي سبعت ما جرشات خوري مالتي تزنا برقد لسي مسوات الخفيل عوت نخمس سنة زي كوينس نسعن نسيب الوطرة خبالي حجي صوم عندهم مدقي قام كي تقنني نتانا يكتران شو عدتن عمد زنبرت هي تسكت انت يدسك فرلو مسرح باي كل صوم وموسى عدم بسياسة منتي نايكزيو تعمل لندينا كيرنا أنتو إيرترا تايسوانيرو بشكل زماني تكالك أتو حاسب نيرو نايكدام خدام السياسة كم تنكالوت نايت خبابينا نايوكن وروكن خول زماني كن مسوس قوينا كابت زغر مكان نغرات بزعبا تمنكس موني هذا نغر كبرنا ዝሓየለ ካብ መሳርሒታት ኣብ ሓደ እዋን እያ ነይረ ካብ ሚሳይል ከሎ ዋላ ዝለዓለ መዳፍዕ ገለመለታት ህዝባዊ ሓይሊ እዩ መንግስትና ናይ ብሓቂ ካብ ብዘይ ቀልዓል ነዚ ሕጂ ንኾርዓሉ ኣብ ቀርኒ ኣፍሪቃ ከም ማለት ስልዕለና ስለዝስምዓና ነትናትና ከነቃውሕ ገለ ስለዝበለና ይኮነ ኣብ ባይታ ዘሎ ዝገልፀና እዩ ማለት እዩ ማለት ነፍስና ዝኸኣልና ብህዝብና ንኮርዕ ኣፍ ልብና ንነፍሕ ምስ ናይ ካልኦት ከኣል የመን ፀጋም ዘይንፈልና ዳስ ዋይ ትደርር ነገር ጌርና ሕጂ እንታይ ንምባል እቲ መንግስቲ ግን ሕድመት ልቢ ናይ ህዝቡ ይሰሚዕ እዩ ይርዳእ እዩ ምስ ወስቆብ እዩ ነዊሕ ግዜ ኣብ ካልሲ ተፈቲኑ ዝሓልፍ እዋናት እዩ ጥቕሉ ሳዕርታት እውን ከምኡ እዩ ሶዛ ሕጂ ጉዳይ ቀዲማ ደላ ንዛ ከም ዘምፃኻ ደጋጊሞም እዮም ምሮሃን ኤርትራን ኣይ መድለየትን እስኪ ንግዜው መግደፋ ኩሉ ሰዓ ከዓኒ ወንፂ ተረኪቡ ኣብ ከነ መጨረሻ ኣብ ጣውላ ኢኻ ታሹ ክትገብራ ትኽእል እዛ ፖርሽን ተረኪበ እሞ ከዓኒ ምስቲ ዝሓለፍ ወሳቱ ሕጂ እውን ዝርድኦም ዶ ሓደ ብሓደ ነቶም ናይ ባሕቂ ክዕንፍፁና ዝደልዩ በዚ ናይ ፅምዶ ሓይሊ ጌርና ናይ ባሕቂ ንጥርናዕ ነበር እቲ ጉዳይ ናናትና ኣለና እዚ ኣያ ክብል ደልዮ እሞ ኣፍታ ዝነበረት ናይ ዞም መማሃራን ይወሲኸላ እምበርካ ዶ ከዋላ ቴንክ ዩ ልቦናይ
مرحبا أسد مدينة مسألة الموقع اللي فيتو قبله ويلتو حتى جلوسة
ኣለኺ ዝሄሚና ሓፊሮም እየ መስለኒ
ኣነ ጣዕማይ ጥራሕ እንዲመስል እንድር
رهوة احنا دي هذا نعم برايمي وكنت صحفي الفلوس نقرأ
ايكو بعجمتي خاف انا حدي شمام لجمير وي خاف ديسكونكت خانا بزغير الى
لازم مسنا مكينة كونكت ثانية بزغنا انت عنتو يتصبط مليس كالو اللي خان تسفالت ابانيش انت يكون صار لي مستاتور ورا قدما بيلو الزارب از نبره تسفالت حدا تنكي دلي يكون انديو ወይ ከም ተስፋለት እንድሕር ኣለኹም ኣብዚ ዜጋታት እቲ ዕላማ ናይቲ ገዛ ኹን ናይ ዝኾነ ይኹን ሃገራዊ ሜድያታት ይኹን ሃገራዊ ፅሑፋት ተቕርብ ኩሉ ኮማት ንበሎ ኩሉ ትካላት ኤርትራዊ ሃገራዊ ትካላት ሲ ዕላምኡ እንታይ እዩ እንድሕር ኢልና ነቲ ተጋጊድ ፀንሐ ንምእራም እዩ ወይ ንምብራህ እዩ ሽግር ተረኺቡ ዘሎ ሕጂ ቁርዶ ዘይፀንሐ ዜጋ ወይ እውን ኣንፃር መስመር ሒዙ ዝፀንሐ ዜጋ ሕቶታት ከልዕል ንቡር እዩ ቅቡልካ እዩ ዋላ ትኻልእ እውን ሕቶታት ከልዕል የብሉን ኣይኮነን እሱ ሕቶታት ኣልዒሉ እቲ ንዑ ሕርግርግ ዝብልዎ ዘይርድእዎ ክንፅረሉ ዋላ ሚልዮን ግዜ ተሓተተ ፀገም የብሉ ፀገም ተረኺቡ ዘሎ ክምህር ዝፀንሐ ክሰብኽ ዝፀንሐ ሃገራዊ ኢሉ ቅድሚት ፀኒሑ ብዙሕ ስራሕ ክዓይ ፀኒሑ ትብሎ ወይ እውን ኣብቲ ሃገራዊ መስርሑ ፀኒሑ ይርድኦ እዩ ትብሎ ኤርትራውነትን ኤርትራን ፖለቲካ ናይ ኤርትራን ይርድኦ እዩ ትብሎ ቃልሲ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ እቲ መስራሕ ክሓልፎ ፀንሐ ይርድኦ እዩ ትብሎ ድንግርግር ክብል ጥራይ ደይኮነስ ክፅይቕ ክትሪኦ ከለካ ይሸጋሪ እቲ ናይ ካልእ መረዳእታት ፀንሖ ሰብ ድንግርግር ክህልዎ ንቡር እዩ ማስኑ ከም ንቡር እያ ዝቕበሎ ኣብኡ ቅሬታ የለዎንን ብዝተኻለ መጠን ዓቕመይ ካብቲ ዘለዎን ላዕሊ ወሲኸ ዓቕሊ ወሲኸ መረዳእታ ክዕብድ እዩ ደለኒ እምበር ንምንታይ ዝሓተትካ ከማን ክብሎ ንኸምኡ ዓይነት ዜጋ ቅቡል እውን ኣይኮነን ፀገም ረኺብና ዘለና ኣብቲ መስርሕ እቲ ፀኒሐ ዝብል ሰብ እዩ ፀገም እንዳኾነ ዝኸይድ ዘሎ መብቲ ስራሕቲ ክዓይ ፀኒሐ ዝብል ሰብ እዩ ፀይቂ እንዳኾነ ዝኸይድ ዘሎ ኣብዚኣ ሕጂ እታ ፀገም ትፍጠር ዘላ እምበር ተስፌ ሚልዮን ሕቶ እንተተሓትት ምስናይ ዋላ ድሕምመኒ ኹን ዋንታታ ኮይኑ እንደይርድኦ ዋላ እንዳበልኩ ክደጋግሞ ጥራይ ኣይደለን ምክንያቱ ቅቡል እዩ እዚ ምክንያቱ ስክፍታ ስለ ዝፀንሐካ ወይ እውን ሕርግርግ ስለ ዝብለካ ዝፀንሕካ ኢኻ እኮ ኣብ ካልእ መስመር ትፀንሕ እንተ ብጌጋ ኣራዳዳ እንተ ብቑኑዕ ልቦና ኣብ ጌጋ መስመር ምፅናሕ ስለ ዘይተረዳእካ እዩ ወይ ስለ ዘይተቐበልካ እዩ ተቐቢለ ክትብል ዝፀናሕካ እዩ ትሽግር ኮይኑና ዘሎ ልዕሊ ሰብካ ክትምድር ዝፀናሕካ እዩ ፀገም ኮይኑና ዘሎ ሰባት ከተጋጊ ኮነ ኢልካ ዕንኪኪ ከተብሎ ንጉዳያት ምስኦም እዩ ፀገም ተረኺቡ ዘሎ ኣነ ብዞም ንክድርቢ ፀንሑ ፀገም የብለይን ኣብ ጌጋ ፖለቲካዊ መረዳእታ ፀንሐ እውን ፀገም የብለይን ለውጢ የድልየኒ ኢሉ ክሓትት ፀንሐ ሰብ ፀገም የብለይን ምስ ኩሎም ፀገም የብለይን እዚኣቶም ምክንያቱ እዚኣቶም ናቶም መረዳእታ መርገፅን ሒዞም ዝፀንሑ እዮም እጂ ተስፌ እንታይ ክብል ደልየ ንእግረ መገደይ ክትሓትት እስኻሲ ልዕሊ ማንም ሰብ መሰል ኣለካ ስለምንታይ ንዓኻ ክርዳእካ ፀንሐ ናትካ ርየት ዓለም ካልእ ስለ ዝፀንሐ ቅቡልካ እዩ ስኻ ሕጂ ናብቲ ሓደ መስመር ክትመፅእ ከለካ ምስናይ ስክፍትኻን ከም ዝኽንዕሎ ፀንሕና ናብዚ ምስ ትግራይ ዘለና ኩነታት ምስናይ ስክፍታና ኢና ንኸዶ ቅቡልካ እዩ ክስከፍ ሰብ ቅቡልካ እዩ ሰብ ክሓትት ቅቡልካ እዩ ሰብ ክጠራጠር ንምንታይ ተጠራጠርካ ትብሎ ሰብ የለን እዚኣ ንፅረልካ ደልን ተስፊኹም ካልኦት ኩላትኩም ኣብዚ እንድሕር ኣለኹ ስለምንታይ ኣይትሕተቱ ከይመስል ተቓልየ ሕተቱ መረዳእታኹም ኣነፅር ኣቢልኩም ሕተቱ ኣብ መትከሉ ፀንሐ ሰብ እዩ ወላቕ ዘላቕ ክብል ዘየድልዮ ነገራት ክዛረብ ነቲ መስርሕ ክዝርግ ኮለል ዝብል ዘሎ ሰብ እዩ ንዓና ሽግር ኮይንና ዘሎ እዚኣ ክትንፅር ደልያ ኣለኹ ኤርትራ ፈርስት ኣንተ ወይ ፅቡቅ እንዲኻ መሊስካ ስክፍታታት ዘለዎ ሲ ንዝኾነ ሰብ ክንምልስ ቁርባት ኢና
ኣካል ዓረባ ፅቡቕነት እንዲኻ ስኻ ኣምፂኻ ምሳ እቲ ቀንዲ ነገር እንታይ ይመስለካ እቲ ግዳይ ዝፀንሐ ህዝቢ እቲ እዚ ገዛ ዝተኸፈተሉ ምክንያት ልክዕ ከምዛ ዝበልካ ንዓኻትኩም ንምርዳእ እዩ ነቲ ክሳብ ሕጂ ሸለል ተባሂሉ ሰብ ድሓን ርድኦ ይፈልጦ እናበልካ ብዙሕ ሰብ ኣብ ጌጋ መገዲ ኸይዱ ክግለፅ ኣይፀንሐን ሕጂ ግን እቲ ናይ ኤርትራዊ ቻነላት እናበዝሐ እቲ ሓቅታት ክግለፅ ኣብ ሃገራዊ መስመር ሰብ ክመፅእ ክትሪኦ ከለካ ንቡር እዩ ሕጂ ዘይንቡር ነገር ኣይኮነን ተጓኒፉ እቲ እንተኾነ እቲ ሕምቀት በቶም ሃገራውያን ይፀኒሑ ወፂኻ ደይ ምዝራብ ማዕረ ነቲ ሓደ ፕሮፓጋንዳ ደይ ምህራም ድኽመታት ስለ ዝፀንሓና እቲ ድኽመት ተኣሚኑሉ ኩሉ ሰብ ወፂኡ ክሰርሕ ኣብ ቅድሚት ወፂኡ ሕጂ ንምንታይ ሓቲትካ ወይ ገሌልካ ንሰብ ክትጓየቆ ይብልካ ኣነ ኣነላኔሳ ዋላ 80 ግዜ ሕተት ዋላ 70 ግዜ እንድሕር ደቂምካ ንኻልእ ትሕልፈሉ ንስኻ መለሻ ትብሎ እምበር እቲ ዝፀንሐ ፀቕጢ ኣብ ልዕሊ ኤርትራውያን ኣብ ጌጋ መርገፅ ንክኸዱ ብዓበይቲ መንግስታት ተሓንፂፁ ክሳዕ ማዓስከራት ተሰሪሑሎም ንዖም ንምድንጋር ዝተገብረ ኣነ ወይ ሮሃ ተዛሪቡ ነፅረዮ ጉዳይ ኣይኮነን እቲ ክብደት ናይቲ ስራሕ ምስ ኣተኻ ይርዳእካ እቲ ኣነ ንርእሰይ ሕጂ ናተይ ተመክሮ ክዛረብ ተኮይነ ስኒ ኣብዚ ገዛ ክመፁ ከለኹ ስኒ ኣብ ትግራይ ተገብረ ግፍዕታት ኣይርዳእኒ ነይሩ ከምዚ እንደ ኣቃሊለ የድርየ ነይረ ክሳዕ ክንዲዚ ግን ኣብዚ ተወርዋሪ ኮፍ ኣቢሉ ነዞም ብማዓስከራት ተሓለፉ እንታይ ከም ተጓነፈ ክሓቶም ከሎ ግን ጥልቀት ናይቲ ስራሕ እናተረዳእኒ መዚ ሽዑ ስራሕ ከዓ ክንደይ ክሳዕ ክንደይ ሓይሊ ኣብ ድሓትት ክሳዕ ክንደይ ብተኻእለና ሽዑ ولا حموش دا تكون مسيحة جزيها خطب تقدر مغنياته التي صفحة نايت سرح سلازر داكا التي تقبر عن وقت قبل علي من سياتنا سلازر داكا تصرح تقدر حجي بمنتعي قلتي فودي تردو يتبلني خا حجي حانت بزي عقنا أنا تصرح زدلي بفل لا يبزاد صندو الدحر زي ترداكا خد حتى تكون هاي تردى أن مو زوج صندوق خير يقولون إلك مزرعة مسألة إخات سرع ذلها إذا هجي نصور لايني مهنياتو صندوق ديدليو شكلتن عشكلتن نطم عشكلتون عشكلتون تسرع مالو إذا صندوق زحمي مو أمضله مهنياتو السلام مثل نقول لنا سلام ديدليو أبز خبابي أو جن أي ورا أي وج أي سلام جرام حزوز دليو حيلتها صندوق مسمى سلع على عيلو حجي كنصر لنا دلو كلنا خين دانا غير እትጹም ደው እንደዚህ ተረዳካ አከም ዛይነት መድረኻት መጽኻ ሕተት እንታይ ኣይርዳእኒ ዘሎ ከመይ ጌርና ሙዚየም ስራሕ ከመይ ጌርና ንኣምኖም ድሕሪ ሕጂ ከም ተቀደም ተገበሩና እዚታት ኩሉ ንቡር ሕቶታት እዩ ድሕር ምስ ግዜ ንሕና ኩሉ ተተመክሮና በበታ ንፈልጣ ንእሽተይ ንዛረብ ድሓር ካብ ናይ ኩላህና ሰሚዕካ ወይ ትናትካ ስክፍታታት እውን ናይ ካልእ ሰብ ስክፍታ ምዃኑ ምስ ተረዳእካ እሱን ሓገዝ ኮይ ግን ብምንታይ ኣብኡ ንሰርሕ ከም ዘለና እቲ ንሕና ምክንያታትን ነጊርናካ ንዓኻ እውን ሓገዝ ዝኾነካ እዩ ግን ከይተረዳእካ ፅምዶ እንታይ ምዃኑ ከይኮነ ፅምዶ ክኸውን የብሉ ፅምዶ ውግእ ደምፂ እዩ ፅምዶ ከምዚ ዝገብር ኢልካ ክዛረብ ከለካ እቶም ፀላእትና ዝብልዎ ስለትደግም ዘለካ ናይ ፀላኢ መሳርሒ ከዓ ትኸውን ሕጂ ኣብዚ ክንጥንቀቕ ኣለና እንድሕር ዘይተረዳእካ ስቕ ኢኻ ትብል ኣብ ከምዚ ቦታታት መፂኻ ካ ትሓትት ኣብቲ ድምልከቶም ኣካል ጌትካ ትሓትት ተነፅሮ ሽዑኡ ፈፂምካ ኣነ ኣይኣምነሉን እዚ ክፈርስ ኣለዎ ኢልካ ድሕሪ መርገፅ ወሲድካ መርገፅካ እዩ ግድን ኣብዚ እቶ ይንብለካ ኢና ግን ንዓና ስራሕ እንታይ ተይካ ከይተረድኦ ሰብ መሳርሒ ናይ ፀላኢ ከዓ ከይኸውን ብጌጋ ከይርድኦ ነቲ ፅምዶ ተወርዋሪ ብነዊሕ ገሊፅዋ ሓንተኦም ናይ ሰላም መስርሕ ከምዃኑ ቀንዲ ስርሐይ ኣነ ምስ ተጋሩ ክራኸብ ከለኹ ብጌጋ ተረዲኦም ሚስ ካልኩሌሽን ከይገብሩ ነቲ ፅምዶ ብጌጋ ከይርድእዎ ፀላእትና ከም ድኽመት ገይርእይዎ ከም ፍርሓት ገይርእይዎ ኣገዳሲ ነጥብታት እዩ ዝሞ እዚኣ ክውፅልካ ኢለ ቴንክ ዩ
Thank you, Retrafers. مو قال هتو زلو بس زلو
اللي هم كمرقز كخمية بتصمدو أشجيراتنا نزلاسا أنت عبتم أشجيرهم نازلوا سبات كيا
أنا أي أني
سرعي فلتنا
كارنس بعلو من بستو وسيت دين زاري وأنا أي
أتصمدني زيا حنت قد أوقع زيا نعمل ناخذ سراتي كنا هجي
نعين اليوم أنا ممكن يا ماستر عندنا كمان مندي كاتستي إن شاء الله يترافلس
ولا لبونا ولا تصدق أي وعدك ما يبزح طلع ما يبزح بتشاق كيف لك ما يبزح بيك وسيك وحتى أمر ريك الله صار أتوصى هذا اللي هاجن وعد هذا
ليه ما
أوه
مرحبا عدو ربطين كيتا هس مرحبا دحانتو نسمعكم وإلا حطينا طيدا كده ما هطيدا كده ما هركب زلايهم جو ما تنكي لما صار ما هطيدا يعني ميكي صبوط تورينا عكوي صبوك يرجلي سوا خلاص موقنا بين كلكم خلاص كلنا وكلكم بتعبوا دبب زلكم قصوا صنيح مالتي صبوت نتيو كاتو تبلس مع دي اللمبكا أنت ما أدري سنة متى تقربها إيه كان متى تسدد تتبلع تسدد مالتي تجي نحن أبزي دوينا دلنا كنا محارات وقفلنا مالتي وسلمت يا زوج الناسي بزحت مكينا قصيدنا نتاي دلنا مالتي لذي أبزي معلنا أنا أدرك يا مو بتعمل صبح بقى هذا نفكر كأستغله بزخنا سيري هم حتى يوا بجربها سوا غير روح حتى ولا تغير روح حتى واحد يا بزخنا سي تفهم بدليسي زي ذو على صبح عندي بتعمل صبح عتوي دور وري دزارون بس بقى عمي عم تشمها يسوى تكالب كمالة يسين كيف كمالة كل سب صبح كزارة وانشي يبون ومالة تجن أختي صبح جرسم أسباب نوكو أسرع وسيلة بريكسي سيكون الميرمات زروس جيستي زي نحنا تدلو من السيكون أو هذا دلسي تتقاسو بها تقول لك سياسة بالمالة بزنا يسوي دونا تيرو إتيسي تقاسي أبدا تقاسي أسمع نسي إفراسي لمن تايدي كالستولو سلمن تايو دليت على النادي نعمل سياتي إفرا كنت كالس مسوات كفل قدم خفف الجلسي زكلو دليت على النادي جن عدلنا خفونة دي مريج أنا نأخذ لنا فينا قليلا يكون فتوينات زكفل كان متاي خلق أمراسي أكثر من بوكيناتي كل ساعة من خفل كاتي أكثر من بوكيناتي دوا بلوة سنة سلام زر الربال صباح دوا بلوة هالكله أي خفلني توي هذا بلام كني أتني هنا إزاي مريج أنا إذا أنا أخذ لنا تكون تحمل مخنياتهم سمعت بروبيس لذا خبنا عددي دومنا مالت بر كل ساعة سبقت بحد خفل قليلا يكون أكثر جزيتي أدم أنا ذكرنا فتشحن تجيب مالتي ما يساسي ورا الجزيسي كلمة يعني رأى هذنا فرق مالتي شعينا أكينا ما يكون تصوم قال مالتي طب يبقى وزينا 5 شو أعتبر الناس توقعنا أكينا ما يكون تصوم قال أكثر جزيتي أحجي نص وزينا سبزنا هذا فأنا إحنا فرق مالتي أكينا لنا اللي تعسر ثلاثة اللي تعسر تعريف بالاقتصادي مالتي اللي تعسر تخصص نسلم سومنا ورحم يدلكم دلوقتي نوحي شتشت يكون نقول دلوقتي نورحم مش يزول دلوقتي هجي بس أنا هنا هجي بقى أتحبسنا مالتي أنا مثلا السيد عندنا بدني شوفات مالس مرة تفهم يوم مالت هجي ولا قد ميون نسمع يعني بينا تدمي صوم تصوم جلسي أختي دابل كيس لازم أقطع أنت جلست تسمعها نسلم سمع قال من اللو جلست تسمعها مالتي لازم الجسم إحنا حبسنا بدينا أبينا صبغة فالحجي بحريني سوسافي ومن تنسترد أخذنا جن عسد أنا تحسرت هذا مالتي عسرت خطر بندر ربنا تاجم بيرو مالتي بزي ما تحتري وحجتي فؤاد مقام بس السلام عليكم وزقاني حاول أقدر مالتي أبز جزيرة خاصة لما نسي كل اسم نسي حجسي أنا أنتي أقول كل جزيرة أكثر تحمل كنا كل صبغات مغفرة للبناتي جوا بلوه نسلام سبوا معلو أصلاً لنا كميانا أمو بوتينا نقبلهم الله قدلهم يتدوي الإنسان نقبلهم فرغان مالتي هجي سي الذي تقبل فيها أو إذا كنا تاجر باز قبل سي سبرو تودر لو تبغى يرم من سيحنا لكيو حتى تبغي لتردو من سيتلو حتى تبغى مخياتو أتزبط مبارك أفتي أقول لك كلنا ويجي ما وتدرنا كم تساس بحالا سب بنقطيتان بسنا قطيتان وحتى من سمكو أسرعت نتيجة وجربت نتيجة كل فرد ولا حتى تفهم جيجات نتيجة كي ترد حاجة يقول لها نم حدثنا ترجع تعرف يجيب لها بس تملسكي أي ترد أن أنت كان تملس موت أو شعور وتردين مثال كان كلا سبكير وتخبطها تسرع حلها ما لتشوف عزومكم لنا خدي حتى زربات حيش نوي ما كان جيد زدد تغيرو بقولس أتها جراويان نزوت إيه نقدر لنا حاجة سنايتهم بقولس أتها جراويان تويلو ما عم تكلم خليج هم تيجي مسوات بزمان كله عز ذلك تخدم مسوات قليلة يكون المتجس كله بقولتي بقنزل ديو بجزيريو كله المتجس سبع عينه سيد هو نسال حجسي كم سطر وخلها أنت يعني غربتنا السلام من كم سوت هاي صبوا مبري السلام كم سوسي صبوا مبري لازم تقبلي هذا لك عز ذلك تيجي لك تتسكن كنتي زي نقط منسيات له نقاط تيفوتوا له وقات سوق قاتغنيس كدرك كون كان زبدأ فايداني نتقاسون سلمتي قالسالو حوي سلمتي زبي قالسالو سلمتي كني مسوء خفل على الكاتو حسيب كون كبير فما تنسن تدانز تكاتاشن جير كسكرت أكو بخلي هجي سجدنا يكون امبراطات هدك أنا راح يكون نتقاس زرود أو كل زرود أو فايداني نبعنو من تسبب تتعب بنفسه بنفسه تتعب بسون ردوا أعزقنا له ولا خطرتهم تدريها كم زي بلا علمات يوم سيزو كنا نفعله مالتي يوم تردهم كم زي عندي عجلة تيج كمالو بس سبحاتي توك من لصو بقبو سنة العقبة صوب غدر عرض القبور دونو ناي صمتو مجدد أنا سبحات بقى قوني لهم كان بجمع ولا قدمات فيزو مالتي أتوقع يوم سفيت أجازة كنا كايدا بقى مش أنا كنت سلام زيك المسبب أمس تجربة سلام زيك تجربة كايدا أنت يوم زبون ولا قلت كنت أكيد بتعني زغير بقدان دور ورس كان معه قدرتهم قليلهم أيقونة نيلو حبيب معه قدرته أيقونة تيلاني يزي صيكا تكال كبري بك أنا ما يزي ما تكل سلزلهم على ما سلزلهم يفوق زبون بري أبزي تنا هم بروح دلو ما من نسيتنا وقت تمال كمان كنت يقولوا صار في لمسي ذات تمال كمان كنت يقولوا صار في لهم كنت يجوا في لمسي كانوا جزء بقوا أمسي سلم تايم فوق فيهم سلام تيلون قرار كلا سوكو تيسر يوم أنا وقت دخلنا دلون إحنا كو نقولات زب المخنيات يبلان كو برزاز حفل وكل مخنيات يبلان كو مخنياتون إحنا أكلنا مريتنا دلادن مريتنا هم ثلاثة كل الأمن زمن تنسى أكل بس حتى يقالوا تفاصيلهم على سيرس نزل أصدق كان تردور لك هجيز يوم عبز دق زبل دلوس كي كم سلك هذا حدثي نزي صوم تاسي بتاجل لو واترديهم مهم إيه فرنسي إيه فرنسي دايما دايما هي مصروف على قد ما زمان سيد اللوتري كنتي مصروف كنتي تقدر كنتي محل خطأ كنتي بدو هذا سجل المسائل من السيد المسافي نفس الوقت من السيد سكومي أنا حسب كن أكون زعل نخبري وكل عمرنا عشان يكون سيد لا عكسي إذا عبر زنا يسون ده نحن قالوني نحن قالوا سنتي ده دليل من داخل خطر دليل مكتي زجره فايدر وبلا خيبة حدو قالوا لا سون زي نقبل فرق عن بريد ولا حد لا يهم فايدة بس أحنا تقولسي عندنا يا ولا فايدة وشنا زنبرة وكنا تردي وفلا إذا إكتيا على هذا نزلنا ناس حسب نزلنا ناس حسب الكايدة نايبس في إقرا الكايدة نزلنا من سراوت الإقرا الكايدة تردي أنت دعني نعنا بمسلو حول حسب مزيمتي صبوا هم غايبتها مزيم تاجم زنبرة ويتنسي هم جرك هاترو بسلكا بسلام دمطو بقى نحنا نقد نتحدد دمصي تግራዋይ ولا عرايدي دمصي دش احنا الراب انت يتجمعلهم انا هم افرض لي سلازي ناس كفنا زصوم ده تبحسي وقع بمسوقتي زغفل سلامي وقع بكوفي كا ديسكاس يركا ترى دي حد زغفل كان سلام كلتي سلام سلازو ንምንታይ ኢና ንሕና እዚ ሓደ ሰባት ስለዉ ፌት እጋር ዝኾኑ ሰባት ስለ ዘለዉ ሲ ዘገርም እዩ በጣም ቦርዲ ኤርትራውያን እዮም ትብል ማለት እዩ እንተኾነ ግን ብዙሓት ዕላማ ዘለዎም ኣለዉ ዝሓለፈ ዝተካል ገንዘብ ዝብልዎ ከዓኒ ኣብ ግባሓን ተኣፊ መታለል እንዲሁ ክንደይ ብገንዘብ ዝታለሉ ኣለዉ ማለት እዩ ንሕና ግን ብዓይኒ ገንዘብ ኣይንሪኦን ኢና ከብታትና ማለት እዩ ወይ ኩሉ ንኸዶ መንገዲ እስቲ ብዓይኒ ገንዘብ ኣይኮነን ንኸዶ እንታይ ደኣኒ بعيني تخطيط وقام تفصل لنا هنا بالإطاريان مني قال حتى لا تقولون أنا قدنيو نزيهم كأنا حاسبهم نحاسبهم كسبقين أنا نزيهم ما بين بقول يعني هذا شيء إطراوي السوق أنت اللي راحي وسيد مثل بري تطلع يلقون يطراو زركني ولا نبحكي أنا سي إطراو سي جبنا إنه زقنا يكون سي أمور كل صنع سلازو هنا سي سئلهم من فاشوا مسيو سايد جوبرنا كل يوم ما كيف أنا سبلا دلها يريد حوي يريد فرست حوي سوم الله هتوت زحمة السبع وبوق زي تردون وبوق من السوق دل عم استفاد على السوشيال ميديا وينهم جزا خفتهم جو ولا جزا عاد سي جزا عاد سوم دوني من إسيا ورا على برسوم ناي سنة أمره وكنا تابسون قتلهم ناي ده بتكلمين هذه أخذ ذي يمكن لهمي
مرحبا أدرك ثانك يو زي نسكنكي تبع ولازم كم هانو سي تايلو حاتي تلو زيا
ጌታቸው ረዳን ጻድቃን ዝርከቦም ናይ ህወሓት ሓለፍቲ ነበር ምስ ብልፅግና ምፅምባሮም ንፅምዶ ስክብታ ይፈቅር ዶ ፅምዶ ናይ መጨረሻ ዕላምኡ ክሃርን እንታይ ድፊት ክግበር ኣለዎ ትብሉ روحاب أخذوا سميكان فوكس أفانتي
اللي حنسبب تبلا لنسى سبب الله تبلا ولا كيما غير حسابي تبلا قالك أو كله يفكرني
هو عندهم
أوكي تنتي سلام جزانا الله خير يا تمدو وجهك بزين زارة ولا عندنا ذكر بعنا خير كنا لستجبر يا زوج صندو بعد كله كان دي جلس شباب مقيمات إلنا نقوله وكان مقيمات بتصرف ناديرنا غيرهم دوست ولا فجيت صندو aku شباب بحثر زبارة رديد أمون بوسلام زدلنا أمون مقيمات زدلنا مقيمات زدلي نتقرأ بقرب بشي دلنا نحن تا سلام سلنا دلي ربحا سلا زي بلنا مقيمات ناتنا ربحا ونسلا زي كونا نايوم نزبطات يوم ربحا سلا زي كونا جزبنا وعليز ربحو زي مخالف فليتو تردي وسلام يبلالو تو مليتات بين نايت ما تلاي منغستي اشافر من حجه عزيزه التي انقساس ويتاتي ما سلام نت سلام زدلي نت كوينا زدلش بسلام يركا مساركتاتو كله نكينا زودو دارو مالتي بسلام نقد يركا كم زي انقساس كم زي سرح تقولو فجنا زي ابرها قبر بسنا سرعات مليسو الله دحرا فيكم ريكم مقامان تشبوي እጂ ቆሙይ ንኣብነት ኩናት እንድሕር ዝብል ኮይኑ እዚ ማእከላይ መንግስቲ ሌና ገይሩ ይትመፅእ ንኣብነት ምስ ዓፋር ንፀምድ ኣለና እዚ ብዓፋር ካብ ኩናት ወላ ሓንቲ ረብሓ ይብልና እዚ ኩናት እዚ ረብሓና ኣይኮነን ኣይገድሰናን ኢሉ ካብዚ ታሽሙ ይወፅእ ኣሎ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ኮኑ ህዝቢ ምሓራ ኮኑ እጂ እቲ ማእከላይ መንግስቲ ብናይ ደገ ልኡካትን ነቲ ናይ ውሽጢ ፀገማትን ንክትፈትሕ ወይ ከዓ ከም ሓንቲ ካርታ ሓሲቡ በዚ ኩናት እያ ኣነ ካብዚ ሽግር ዝክወፅእ ኢሉ نعنا لكي ما بينات بتوالنا بدي تشغل زلهم إذا كان أنا ربحنا يكلم بدي كوينات تجبر نحن كوين كمخيات كله كله ما بنا تزبير راسي كوينات تجبر نحن كوين هذا أجر داس نجار بداي مريض بداي لا لا وندي بدي فرق كله ويكا تاندي بالمحرمتي كانوا رجاي بالكا وحسنا كايلكا تجبر إذا شاب زي بني يفكر على عمد جيري حجي نحن أبتي ميديا كل جزء ذهبنا ترى هذه كنا ستكرابينا جو politics انتهي مثلا لا أخنا رجع ولا لا كلمتينا يجمعوا سي انتهي زبنيرو بكيري لا بالشمال يفكر يرو بالشمال الدبلوماسي بتاعشون يرو فتيفو ندحري كم زميلاس يرو بدحري يمشي أقدمون بعاسة متحاسبين بحرنا الشمال كيد أجي أبزو مستقل تعامت إذا قيد زنبري نزل بمتاحة تجبر كل جزء نجارات ببرد راح يكون فرق فتحهم تجبر زي بارك عارونها ዲፕሎማሲያዊ አሰራርሓ ሙስተንከባቢ ታዲ እንዳተራዳካ ትኸይድ እቲ ናይ ምርዳ መንፈስ እንድሕርዳ ዓሲሉ ሰብ ዝወላ ሓንቲ ክገብሮ ዝኽእል የለን ህዝቢ ሒዝካ ኢኻ ናብ ኩናት ትኸይድ ስለዚ እዞም ህዝቢታት እዚኦም ትግዕ ኢልዎም ካብ ኩናት ሰልቺዎም ኣይድልየናን እዩ ረብሓናት ኣይኮነን ይብለዉ ሶ ንሕና ነቲ ኩናት ዝገብር እየ ዝብል ዘሎ በቶም ህዝቢታት ጌርና ናብ መገዲ ሰላም ንኸይድ ኣለና እጂ ምናልባት ሻዕብያ ፈሪሓ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ ከምዚ بحر نحن ما شاء الله عم جانا مرنا فينا جانا كنا بحال عم بلغنا أبوت أنا نحرمتي مرجعات يبلا سجاب زي ما تقولين بطل مزبوطات ديرتا نتحاول ما يكون سنسلو أقدر داسو يسمعان حتى نايبو محمد بن مايك حيزر الله يرضى العالم إبراهيم يرضى مايك تسجل معلمين الله بعد ساتكان بعد جيتاچو كام مجمرات حيزم نتو تصندو طرح زي كونا سامونغو تهزبتات كوينات كلهم سنسو نبيح بمتغيرهم نويهم تعيران بتينهم بتجذبون أي حاجة زمان. شو مكان مشابه ما أبتو ميليتات نايت جراي ونفستوس غيره من هذا ما تاويسهم على مون كساتي بجيهم بتينهم. نذكر إن حركة ناقمي تناي بريتوريا مفرمو. ناي منجس وتعلرات ويكا ناي منجس سافر دوبات ناي إيرتران تجراي سافر على ويلهم يشوف دروس دنوور شميل. توم وتعلرات ناي تجراي عبد النهار عاتيهم عبد تدلي ما قدكم كيس لنقل يوم شباب زيهم كاتو يقولون أمون قهوتي أنا كاب علماء بطفنا كيلنا تسجل كيلنا دينهم سجى حجينا تمجدي قدوا الله سلازي الشام حجون كقاديم تزبغ ترديور ناتو سانة وسيل الله تزبلنا حاجة يسوي بتاعها ولا حاجة أنجر غيرك نعم مريض كاي من البعض مثل ما كان منجسي ما يترواش ምፍጣን ክገብሩ ክእሉ ብዝተፈላለየ መገዲ ግን ነዊሕ ዝኸይድ ኣይኮነን ካብ ምፍጣን ግን ዘዕርፉ ይኮኑን ክብል ኢለ ቴንኪዩ
Thank you, Avantai. Thank you. Roha, to the girl, I'll eat first.
أوصل دهان احترابي ليهم من السادية سكفتا أيفوترون دو هو سكفتا لا فتيرو من بار سكفتا قوينهم سي انتاي جيروم مسلكا انتم TDF بوغي بتاعت تصغير مسرح واليوم سي أخيبا جيرو الحج اندعار نحنا نفلطو منግስት ኣብ ትግራይ እቲ ኣብ ፕሪቶሪያ ከይዱ ዝተሰማምዐ ሓይሊና ንፈልጥ ካልእ ሓይሊ ንፈልጥ ኢና ስለዚ ያላውጡ ኢሎም ካብ ትግራይ ሰጊቦሞም ሃዲሞም ከይዶም ኣዲስ ኣበባ ኣብ ኣዲስ ኣበባ ዝተዳለወትሎም መንበር ወሲዶም ሕጂ ዓቕሚ ናይ ትግራይ ንምድኻም ተዋዳዲቦም ብውሽጢ ብገንዘብ ይኹን ብኸባቢያውነት ይኹን ብገለ ሽርሒ እንዳፈጠሩ ነታ ትግራይ ክብትንዋ ይፅዕሩ ኣለዉ ሰው ኣንጻር ፅምዶ ፀገም ኣሎ ዶ ዓብ ፀገም እምበር ሳቶም ዳ ኣንጻር ፅምዶ እዮም ንሶም ፀሚዶም ዘለዉ ሕጂ ፅቡቕ ነገሩ ኣብ ትግራይ ግዜን ከምዚ ተዘሪጉ ዝፀንሐ ማይ ዝግ እንዳበለ ነገራት ይኸይድ ስለ ዘሎ እንታይ እንዳኾነ ኸይድ ኣሎ ገምሃሎ ዓርከይ لما يندا ترى تحريت كان تحت ندا وردخ أما جرشة إذا بتقرأي تحك إني ما يكريو جميرو له حجي زرع يزول فتما جمرتها قداي فتحي قداي ديمقراسي قداي كلام اللي ندا تباله مستيحل في تاريخنا ويانا تجيجا كايدا بزح تعاومات نعاوم كبزح تعبالنا تكره بخيلهم نيرو بزح سبب مجاجم نيرو أبوش تقرأي تراي دي كونس أبدقون كي ترفه نتعاقمي ناي تجارو أدينهم مونيرا أنت نتاي كن زنقو عليه لنا جيجي في نيرو بدك عقم ناي تجارو فلي أبدك بتعمي حياة نيرو كنت سكروس الدبلوماسية ومسرح حق لنا ناس مرة يوم نتصابونا نيرو نخل الجيب نكسب جيجي في دقة نيرو بزحنا من قصاص مانيفر ناي مقبار كألت نيرو توديهم بزحنا قرات بقول كل نيرو لازم يترفع بتاعتي أمه جي أما جرش انت حاسي أوريدهم ساتهم تلك تقرأي بذكبتها أبزت صمدو أتيان يران تتخول بتنا كرم حيلة إذا نايت صمدو قعزو نايب حكا نويح قعزو تقو عايزهم هلو وحجي كابزلوان لعل خيدهم هل يجي كنت استبتنا تقرأي قوينا عاوما استداخل مخوينو ولا بديبلوماسيوي أبلع لي حواحات TDF نسيت صوتي غور الجمير دولو بدقن من أي دق حيلة وزن تاير إيكا ساتهم سرحوا زلوا سرح كليل أكو أنصار كان أساتك زي أمريكا نتمالا لسوا بزلوا ما بزلوا سبات ندخل كنات كايدو زليو ليتم ما عندك يعرفهم ساب ستيت ديبارتمنت زلوا سبات كالوت مجلتات بس عرفتهم سرح زلوا وقن تقرأيكا كأوزوات جنرالات بولو معلو جيتات شو زركوا بس بلتقنا خينو بس سرح سرح الله تصبونا قاروغن كذب تقرأي كريم جميل رايجي تقدم نعم يزدقف نيرو نبرتين تلي وين نيرو هزبي حوات بال ولا بتنت بليدو نيرو كيدو نيري هزب تقرأي بتنت بال حوات تايدو نخدق من خبز العليل نيري سو أفتنا ريفورم بعد ما ديمقراطية بعد لو تالي بوليتيكال مسرحات متعرّي قال زبلو أو كيدو مكان في الليمن سيات تأميدو نيرو أجيم نيرو مصوم أي بحكي ما بدعونا خا نيرو ساتهم تقرأي تواتات نيرو ما نيرو تزغون درو خمت عنتو يزول كوستي تود بشاشة ليتن معت زي عرفت دوسو سولو زلو خينات سي تحمقت ناي كينات مدل عواسط ودي محلوها قرفوتي ولا تاتيت تدي تتكوسس سيت مسرح سي اوريدي ابدفع ناس افتفي تفيت سمح لنا حجم سراويت إثيوبيا ولا TDF البالاو تتصمبيرو حين يخفد تبايلو اوريدي صارت قينا ساعتنا محلنا تتكوسون محلو بكزي ما كانت تبنانا اوريدي تتيت تتكوس محلو يدبل نعود يعود قاعد حتى نقفص
مسرح بتتوقع قطع حسنا عندي حسيبه بدي فينا هون صعين قطع السوق بناتو كالكوليشن أزام نتلصم ده كاشام شو كل اللي بزلوا دناقو أبز السوشيال ميديا نروقات نبزق نروقات by the way يوم كدينا يوم كاينا مسا رام بلاي كيكس نتاعا بركة قبل بنا نحن نوصل من قصيدنا قوتي ونجح حبوي كنا كل علامة ناتم دنبرة ناتم دناقور مالتي دناقور سلوزقوننا أسماتهم دين العلوم كن سرحتني هذا بسرنا وخانم درو فلتنا منا ونحن تعدي سبعة عتيقة سرح من جمر كتجات عتيقنا هنا تغاريتنا كن علامهم دنبرة جليتهم دنبرة نتوقعتا النسق وتشخلنا سراويتو نحن خينا قرنا يبايزوا يوجه خب زلام بسان كبابي نخط فوق أو من دمالتي ولا زعج مالتي زعج وتشخلنا خب زلام بسان قلبنا مش تتصموا عبيلو هدي بيوزيو تانكتاتون قلنا نحيزو مال نيري أبزلام بسان نيري سراويتو زلام بسان نيرو بس صورنا نيرو بقول وتاتات نيرو من حتى سراويت لأن زنبرنا موتا نيرو من أتصموا عبيلو خادم كله انتهي تعلامات وري أنا بزيهم زاربونو سنة زين دلهم بق حسيبه ما زنبورو بعد الزنا بعد كان بعد ጌታቸው ረዳ ጉጅለ ረሃምጃ ነተሰራዊት ቋጥሮ ፈቲና ነይሮም ጌታቸው ረዳ ዝክሮ ተኾንኩም ሰለስተ ካብቶም ላዕሎት ሓለፍቲ ኣዝ ሰራዊት ወረቐት ፅሕፍ ኣቢሉ ሰጊግዎም ካብ ስልጣን ሰጊግዎም ኣለኹ ዝበለሉ እዋን ዝክሮ እንዲኹም
ነቶም ምስኡ ኮይኖም ዘለዉ ኣሃዱታት ገይሩ ከተሰና ሓሲቡ ነይሩ
ኤግዛክትሊ ነቶም ምስኡ ዝነበሩ ኣዘዝቲ ሰራዊት ንዖም ሒዙ ነቶም እምቢ ኣይንገብርን ኢና ዝበልዎ ንዓቶም ወረቐት ፅሕፍ ኣቢሉ ካብ መዝነትኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ኢልዎም ክገርመኩም ሽዑ ምሸት ንሳቶም ንፅባሒታ እዮም ምንቅስቃስ ገይሮም እቶም ካብ ስልጣንኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ዝበሎም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ሓዊሱ ምስ ኩሎም ተሓተወት ተኣዘዝቲ ናቶምን ኣህዱታቶም ከይተረፈ እያ ኣድስኪልዎም ንሳቶም ምትሓዝ ኣበይ መንበርቲ ዕላማ ዝነበረ ንዓቶም ኣብ ትሕቲ ቀይዲ ንኸትዎም እዮም ተንቀሳቒሶም ነይሮም ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት እቲ ዕላማ ዝነበረ ነቶም ምስኦም ሕራይ ዝበሉ ከም በዓል ወደን ጥሩ ገለመለ ሒዝካ ነቲ ንፅባሒቱን ድሕሪ ፅባሒቱ ቀጥታ በዚ ንሕና ዶባት ውግእ ከፍቱ ይጅመደብ ነይሩ ንኽትፈልጥዎ ማለት እዩ ትደይተነግሮ ኣነ ነዞም ደናቁር ኣብ ዩቱብ ኮይኖም ዝፍክሩ ናይ ብልፅግና ተላኣኽቲ ሰብካ ፈሊጥዎም እንዲ ናይ ብልፅግና ተላኣኽቲ ምዃኖም ክሕቡ ይክእሉን እዮም እዮም ከዓኒ ሰብካ ክከላኸለሎም ኣይክእልን ተሓቂ ንሱ ስለ ዝኾነ ደናቁር ስለ ዝኾኑ እምበር ሓሲቦሞ ዝነበሩ ነቲ ሰራዊት ሒዝካ ናይ ትግራይ ማለት እዩ ያላ ኸይዱ እቶም ዛላንበሳ ገዝካ ሓዛ ክበሃል እሞ ሽዑ ቶክቶክ ክጅምር ሽዑ ትፈደራልካ ረዳት ተባሂሉ መፂ ክሕወሶም ይትመደብ ነይሩ ምሸት ከባቢ ንሳቶም ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ዲስሚስ ኣብ ዝገበረሉ ጌታቸው ረዳ ስማዕ ኣለኹም እጆ ሎማዓንቲ ክነግረኩም እየ ተሓቂ ኣብ ተዩ ፀገም የብሉን ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ዲስሚስ ክገብር ከሎ ሰጎም ከሎ ፅሒፉ ኣብ ስልጣንኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ክብሎም ከሎ ንምሸቱ ከባቢ ሰዓት 6-7 ኣቢሉ ኣነ ንባዕለይ ካብ ትግራይ ተደው ኢልኒ እሞኑ ይትእመኑ ማለት እዩ ሰብ ኣለዉ ሙሉእ ትግራይ ኣብ ሙሉእ ትግራይ ንምሸቱ ከባቢ 7 መኻይን ዓበይቲ መኻይን 7 መኻይን ሰራዊት ኣራጊፉ በዚ ራያን ከባቢኡ ማለት እዩ ንምሸጡ ማለት እዩ ስለዘይንዛረበሉ ሰዓቱ ስለዘይኣኸለ ሲልና ምስ ፀጥታ ምስ ገለ ስለ ዝተሓሓዝ ኢና ዘይንዛረብ እምበር ተሓሲቦሞ ዝነበሩ ፅቡቅ ጌርና ኢና ንፈልጡ ነቲኦም ካብ ስልጣን ኣውርድ ኣቢሎም 7 ዝኾና መኻይን ኣውሪዶሞም ኣብ ግንባር ራያ ትብልዎ ከባቢ ማለት እዩ እቲኦም ክጅምሩ እሞ ቶክቶክ ከብሉ እቲኦም ከዓ ሕውስ ኢሎም ክኣትውዎም ይትመደብ ነይሩ ማለት እዩ በዚ ቢልካ ነቲ ኩናት ባዕባዕ ተብሎ እቲ ዕላማ እዚ ነይሩ ንሳቶም ዘይተፀበይዎ ግን እቲ ክከታተሎም ፀንሐ ሓይሊ ከዓኒ ንሳቶም እንታይ ጀመሩ ከሎ ብዓዲ ግራት ክፀራርጎ ጀሚሩ ማለት እዩ ምናልባሽ ነቶም ሻዕብያ መን ምዃኑ ዘይፈልጡ ማለት ከነላልዮም ምስ ሻዕብያ ደናቁር ኣብ ዩቱብ ኮይኖም መንግስትና ንፈልጥ ኢና ድብሉ ደናቁር ከነላልዮም ሻዕብያ ማለት እዩ እና ከነላልዮም መንግስቲ ኤርትራ መን ምዃኑ ማለት እዩ ኣውዲቓትን ላምጀ تدحزنني أولي ذاك اليورا
الله
تدحزنني قلنا يجوم دناقور ألف دون قرار حكي في لي كنا مكزارو بقولوا وأنا نتدو قرنا وكشفون زي المحاولة من حزنا المعرض ألفي لنقول نايف كافلتات نتسع بخونو سبعة عموم سلا ديفولتي عموم تزفلت نيرو عموم حزام سقور نيرو لا عموم يز زي حين زارو مثلا أيفولتو أنا نزمت شنو لما ميت عملت مرة نيرو ما يفولتو أنا قلنا
I think we got to consider the fact that the U.S. has done crazy stuff in the past, typhoid, smallpox, blankets, these indigenous people. The list goes on and on. Like, we could talk about